minutes after 10 is the time. A very good morning indeed to you. I'm just so tempted then just to rip up. I mean, we don't exactly have a running order, as you've probably worked out for yourself over the if you've ever listened to this programme before. But I mean, tempted just to say what's going to happen in the Strait of Hormuz, what is going to happen in Iran. Problem is, we've stumbled into a situation that we've never stumbled into before, in that we kind of have an Uber caller on this issue. We have a caller, a contributor who is so qualified. I think he almost intimidates and alienates everybody else. He's almost put me off having a go at trying to work out what's going on in the world. So possibly I'll decide a little later in the programme whether or not we will wade into that, or whether or not we will just call upon our Uber caller. That's a nice phrase. Should we add that to the show's vocabulary? How many Uber callers do we actually have? Over the years, we've had more than one. Currently, we possibly only have one Uber caller. Well, anyway, I digress. Balama in Lambeth, he's an Uber caller. Ash in Northampton is an Uber caller. Michael in Greenwich, I think, is an Uber caller. We have a few Uber callers. And by Uber callers, I kind of mean people who are people who other programmes would phone up and book, but who are kind enough to ring us, as it were, on the fly. I don't think we have an Uber caller, do we, on the climate crisis question? Somebody who is so supremely qualified that the rest of us end up feeling a curious combination of awed and grateful. But it is to that story that we turn our attention today. So, most UK media stories about the record-breaking heatwave that struck in June, and of course it's not exactly chilly at the moment, completely failed to mention the climate crisis. About 2,500 articles about the extreme heat appeared in the UK's 9 national daily publications. And remember, this is a memo as much to you as it is to me. We've got to stop talking about how dead the newspaper industry is, because they all have websites, and the websites are continue to be enormous. So nearly 2,500 articles about the extreme heat, when temperatures, as you know, topped 37 degrees centigrade. I was in Greece last week to cool down. That's not the best joke, is it? But it works. I went to Greece last week to cool down. 72% of the 2,500 articles, you can do the maths yourself, left out any mention at all of global heating or indeed the climate. This comes from the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit. Meanwhile, fewer than 5% of stories mention net zero, which is not a panacea. Net zero is not a sort of flawless answer to complicated questions, but it does two things. It recognises the emergency, it recognises the urgency of the issue, and it has a crack at addressing and or arresting it. So it is imperfect, it is flawed as a policy proposal, and of course it is hard to implement or indeed justify when it's done autonomously rather than internationally. But it does two things. It acknowledges the scale of the emergency, and it at least has a crack at addressing or acknowledging the crisis. And the other thing I was thinking of doing on the show today, and it's quite possible, Olsen in North London points out, James, it's probably not the best time to wade into the Strait of Hormuz. There is our pocket literalist this morning. I like that. That's very good. Well done. The other question I was going to ask you this morning is what you're doing to cope. Because I was in Greece last week, and you just know when you're in a country that is engineered to cope with the heat. Everything is different. Everything from shop opening times to the prevalence of air conditioning is completely different. And we are not that country. I'm fascinated by what these places are like in winter, but I don't think I've ever visited. Countries that are, if you like, tooled to cope with extreme heat, and what you do to become one. And I'm thinking about that as a topic for you, as a question to put to you in all the usual ways. And I realise that perhaps I'm part of the problem. Because if I felt myself, would it be? I don't know. Is it lazier? What's likely to get the more what are you more likely to ring in and answer? Or rather, let me be a little bit stentorian. What are you more likely to be interesting about? If I say to you, what do we have to do to become a country that can cope with the heat? I'm conducting a conversation that is more or less ignoring the climate crisis. I mean, you're simultaneously acknowledging it and ignoring it, which is quite a weird thing to do. So if we did that phone in, how do you become a country that can cope with extreme heat? Would we be actually falling into the 72% of coverage that leaves out any mention of global heating or the climate when discussing the heat wave? I think perhaps we would. Would it, do you think, be okay with you if I could have my cake and eat it this morning? If we could actually have a crack at doing both? So here's the one I want you to ring in on now, okay? Why? Why do you think 72%, and I'll take any answer you've got. I've got my own theories. I'll share them shortly. 72% of articles, and there were 2,500 of them in a single month, about the extreme heat that we enjoyed last month in June. 72% of them left out entirely any mention of global heating or the climate. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. People flying out of Mediterranean countries with a temperature measurably lower than it is when they land back in the UK. But I want to know why you think, what's your theory, very simply, on why the coverage of the consequences ignores the cause. Ooh, that's quite nice, isn't it, as a phrase? Why does the coverage of the consequences completely, just to extend the alliteration ever further, why does the coverage of the consequences completely ignore the cause? In many ways, it breaks all the rules of journalism, doesn't it? Or does it? I mean, who, what, why, where, when? Who, what, why, where, when? Why? It breaks the golden rule of journalism, really. We're having a conversation about the what, and we're not going anywhere near the why. Why does the coverage of the heat wave, why did the coverage of the heat wave last month completely ignore the cause? So we can talk until we're blue in the face, or bright red in the face, about the consequences, but we completely ignore the cause. 0345 6060 973. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. And then we come to I suppose the question that almost puts us in the category that's under discussion, which is the question about what we need to do. What do you do? And I actually find this very interesting. Am I being too meta today? I don't mean that in a self-referential way. I mean that in a sort of, am I being pretentious? I find that first question absolutely riveting. But I'm also fascinated by why I find the next question interesting. Because the next question is twofold. What are you actually doing differently now? How is your life changing according to the heat? The heat is extraordinary, you know. This is now normal. This isn't like 1976 where we all look back 50 years later and go, flipping heck, do you remember when the hedge caught fire at Auntie Doris's? That's just not going to happen. And the water in the paddling pool was so hot you could have boiled an egg in it. That kind of thing. That's now going to be normal. That's where we are now. That's what this country is. It's now 1976 every summer. So what are you doing differently? And is the fact, this is where I worry I'm being a bit meta, is the fact that I find that question so interesting part of the reason why we do the coverage without talking about the climate crisis? Because, pull up a deck chair, all right, have a nice cold one, and have a chat with me about what you're doing differently because it's now all got so hot. Oh, but don't mention the climate crisis, James, because that just makes everything so depressing and apocalyptic. I want to have a chat about how many ice lollies you're getting through in a day. Do not ring me to tell me how many ice lollies you're getting through in a day. That was a throwaway lot. That would be a little bit too trivial. So I'm sitting here wanting to listen to you talking about the heat, talking about what you are doing differently at work, at home. Even, I've got to be honest with you, I've even quite enjoyed the newspaper articles offering advice on what you do. I've tried to set the fan up in the bedroom so that it blows out of the window at a certain time. I need to go back to my notes, but doing the things that make things better. I tell you what, I finally understood the point of. Listen, this is going to go a little bit parking tickets for 90 seconds. Awnings. That's the word of the day on today's show, Keith. All right, make a note. Awnings. I've finally understood the point of awnings. Do you know what an awning is? An awning is a hat for a house. So you know when you've got a window and you go to a shop and there's an awning, like a sort of horizontal blind that goes out above the window. Think of that as a baseball cap for a house. Why do you wear a baseball cap? Well, apart from to look good in your Keith Haring limited edition from Uniqlo, in my case. But why do you wear a baseball cap on practical terms? You wear a baseball cap to keep the sun out of your eyes, right? So what does an awning do? An awning stops the sun hitting the window directly and heating up the air inside. So I am currently, having failed completely to buy an air conditioner, because every single one in the country seems to have been sold, I'm now looking into, for next summer, the possibility of getting some awnings installed on the back of the house. When you go to hot countries, you suddenly understand why they have shutters on the outside. This is physics, Keith. They have shutters on the outside of the house so that you are stopping the air on the inside from heating up, because if you have your shutters on the inside, then you're still having the sunlight hit the glass and heat up everything inside. You'll still be cooler with the shutters shut than you would if you had no shutters. She sells seashells on the seashore. But if you've got the shutters on the outside of the house, then you're shutting out more heat, which means the rooms stay cooler. Awnings. It's a lovely word, that. Shall we all say it together? Shall we? Go on, don't do this if you're at work or, currently working in air traffic control or something like that. Awnings. Awnings. You know that David Bowie song, Holes, halfway through Hunky Dory? I forget which track it is. He just, someone on that track, I think it's Bowie himself, just goes, holes. They start saying holes because it's such a lovely word, holes. Awnings. I'm going to get some awning. What are you doing today? I'm getting myself some awnings. It's a bit Paul Merton, isn't it? You can imagine Paul Merton saying, awnings. What are you doing today, Paul? Getting some awnings. Oh, isn't it marvellous? I'm going to get myself some awnings. So that's the kind of thing you might be doing to cut, and it's already a more interesting conversation. I'm being funny. I'm feeling quite light-hearted now. Start off contemplating a climate crisis, end up sounding very odd, repeating the word awnings. And that's the problem. Right there is the problem. What would you rather talk about? Awnings or imminent planetary doom? Probably awnings, James, on reflection. Maybe it's not a mystery at all. What do you want to talk about? Awnings and strawberry mivies? Or excess deaths that have been caused, estimated already to be about 2,700. Oof. But we've got to do both. You've got to do both. We can't become part of the 72%. We can't become part of the 72% that has these conversations about the heat without actually talking about the climate crisis. So, question number one, why? Why is so much of the coverage of the consequences completely ignoring the cause? If you're feeling really clever this morning, you can have a crack at how we might do things differently. As a country, as a society, as a population, how might we actually ride both horses, have conversations about the consequences while constantly acknowledging, exploring, examining the cause? And that doesn't always work when I give you 2 or 3 questions to mull over in the course of the same hour. But I'm also really, as you can tell, what's your awnings moment? What's your awning dawning? The dawning of the awning. What's your equivalent? So for me, my big takeaway from the current heat wave, if we're leaving aside for the moment the science, which of course we're not, but you take my point, my big takeaway from the current heat wave is awnings. Awnings. What's yours? What are you going to do differently? What are you doing differently? How do we become a country that can cope every year with extreme heat? How do we do that? Because I'll tell you one thing for nothing, and this really occurred to me while I was on my holiday. It's Warhol, Andy Warhol, so now I've remembered which track it was. You probably need to listen to this introduction in its entirety to have the first idea what's going on. If you've just tuned in now, my apologies. But seriously, use rewind and start again. You look at the big picture, you are drawn to the little picture, and somewhere between the two, our conversation today will be conducted. Because the thing I was about to tell you for nothing, before I forgot what I was about to tell you for nothing and started talking about Andy Warhol, was that we can't do what the hot countries do because of commuting. That's another C, isn't it? Consequences, cause, coverage, and commuting. We can't do it. We can't shut. So you want to go to the chemist, the little village I was in Greece. It's shut between 2 and 6. I think it opens at 9 or 8 in the morning when it's relatively cool. But it shuts. Everything shuts. Even some of the hospitality places shut in a tourist town. They shut between 2 and 6. We can't do that here because it takes you an hour and a half to get home. By the time you get home, all you're going to have to do is feed the cat, turn around and come back out again. So there's some things we can't do as a country to respond to the heat. But I wonder what we can do. What are we going to have to do? 03456060973. What are you already doing? What have you done? And what's your awning dawning? What's your awning dawning? But of course, the question you're probably not going to want to answer, but I really, really want you to, is the big one. Why? In the UK, do 72% of articles in 9 daily publications covering the so-called heat wave, covering the record-breaking heat wave that struck last month, why do almost all, you could say, of the articles reporting it entirely leave out mention of global heating or the climate itself? Why is that happening? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. It's 10:20.
James O'Brien on LBC.
21 minutes after 10. It has been suggested that by Declan, having enjoyed my introduction to today's programme, Declan's been in touch to suggest that I shouldn't wait until next year to get warnings because it sounds like I'm already suffering from heat stroke. I take your point, Declan, but trust me, I'm fine. Well, you know what the questions are. I'll start listening to some of your answers before I go off on another tangent. At least I'll try. Mike's in Marlow. Mike, what would you like to say?
Yeah, good morning, James.
Hello.
I live in a big old place, and it was built in about 1870, and it's got thick walls everywhere. It still gets very, very hot because it's about keeping the sun out rather than letting the sun in. Your house, I would imagine, is Victorian built, and it's exactly the same. It's solid walls, so it's pretty poor in the winter. But you don't care because you just put another heater on. But come the summer, you realise that those walls aren't that great, and also the size of your windows aren't that great, and also
because all of that,
isn't that great.
This is the point, isn't it? Is that almost all of our homes have been built for a climate that we no longer live in.
James, as an ex-builder, I can tell you hand on heart that we didn't really start using insulation in houses until the 80s.
Yeah.
That's shocking. So anything built pre-80s is appalling. They experimented with the size of the windows, the amount of glass, just look at the amount of flat roof extensions out there. They're just soaking up the heat. And then what do? Run out and buy an air conditioning unit with a thing hanging out the window, pumping out hot air.
Yeah, and that's not very good for the environment either. Although I don't rain on this parade yet because I want to cling to the hope for a moment. But I do quite like the idea of solar-powered air conditioners. I know that they'll still pump heat outside, but they won't use energy in the same way. But someone's going to ring me in the next hour and tell me that that's a ludicrous idea because ... No, I said don't do it yet. I want to cling on to that for at least 20 minutes, please, Michael. Okay? Honestly, just let a boy have some fun, will you? So what are you doing? What are you doing?
Honestly, James, we're all pointing in the wrong direction. Trust me.
I know that. So what are you doing right?
Well, I'm not doing anything right necessarily, other than trying to keep the sun out. Because like I said, it's a big old rambling place that is in direct sunlight all day, and it gets hellishly hot in here. I've got fans running internally. I try and block the sun to create some shade.
Yes.
But that's about all I can do because the way this is built and the way your house is built and most of the housing stock, there's a lot of either very badly insulated cavities or none at all.
I mean, without getting too personal about it, my gaff's all right, actually. My gaff's quite cool. I don't know whether it's something to do with north, south, east, west.
Is it terraced?
No.
It's not?
No.
Is it end terraced or semi-detached?
I mean, hang on a minute. I don't know how much I want to give away. It's
not that. It's how much exposure you've got. Because if you're a terrace, you've only got front and back.
No, it's a detached house.
It's a detached house.
Yeah, but we've got quite a lot of trees.
Your house now is exposed on all four sides.
But we've got, well, not really. There's only a little gap down the sides. But we've got quite a lot of trees. So I think that the shade, I think they're like awnings, aren't they?
Yeah.
So the heat is not hitting the windows.
When was it built, roughly?
About 1897, probably March. I think it was finished. I don't know exactly.
It's all solid brickwork.
Yeah, it is. But it's cool in winter. It's cool in summer.
Yeah, but what's it like in winter?
Well, I mean, I don't know how interesting this is for everybody else, but we when we moved in, because we bought a wreck and we've done it up, when we moved in, the room on the top floor, there's one room on the top floor, and that was like an ice box. But then we insulated it really well. Now it gets really hot. So I think we've actually done some quite good work on our house by accident.
You probably have.
It's not a very good example of what you're describing. Because we're quite cool. We're quite cool in summer, and we're all right.
1980s.
Yeah, no, it is old. It is old. So what you're saying is there's nothing we can do because solar air conditioners are going to make it worse. What can we do then apart from closing the curtains during the day?
You can insulate from the inside. You see, it's one thing doing the ceilings. Everybody thinks, well, all the heat escapes out of there.
Yeah.
But it also escapes out of your windows. It also escapes out of your walls. But it also escapes out of your floors. Believe it or not. Very small percentage. So you can insulate the walls from the inside.
But these are quite big jobs, aren't they?
Oh, massive.
Yeah,
massive, James. And look at the housing stock. What percentage of our housing stock has been built with insulation included?
About 4.
Well, any single number I'd have thought.
Is that a rhetorical question, Mike?
Well, it is. Yeah, it's rhetorical.
Sorry, I thought we were doing a pop quiz.
But it's the one that needs answering.
I know. Well, Wayne in Basildon used to do. He's a milkman now, but he used to do insulation in walls, and it was a government scheme, wasn't there? But it's all gone a bit wrong. I think it didn't. Well,
that's
land.
if you've got a cavity wall.
Yeah, of course it is. Of course
you
it is.
haven't. You haven't. Yours is built in
97, maybe a bit earlier. We're not entirely sure.
Well, there you go. They didn't start messing around with cavity walls until about the 1920s.
To have something to insulate. But if you've got really thick brick walls, you're quite well insulated.
You are reasonably, absolutely.
That's what
but then you've got massive windows.
Yeah.
So then you've got drafty floors.
And if it's an older house, you can't.
Your house would be wooden floors, most of it.
Yeah,
or at least the front rooms.
Well, are you some sort of house whisperer?
Yeah.
Well, you know I've got wooden floors because I told the story about next door's cat getting stuck under the floorboards when we were having them put in.
Absolutely.
So you're not clairvoyant,
but also,
mate.
I know the building style from that year.
Yes, of course you do.
I'm a retired builder.
Yeah, of course you do.
So I know that if I'm going to work on a Victorian house, I almost guarantee you that the front rooms, the front parlours and everything else would be timber.
Yeah.
And they would change as they went back. So the further back you go, the more solid the floors get.
Yeah, no, you're right. God, I bet you're a good builder. No, clearly it is. I'm really enjoying this conversation. I just need to acknowledge that we're not making an enormous amount of progress on what we can do to fix things, apart from your point about insulation. But in terms of identifying the scale of the problem, you've been absolute gold dust.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome, Mike, because that's the point, isn't it? Is that we need to recognise. So when I ask these silly questions, not silly necessarily, so what do we need to do to become a country that can cope with the heat? In some ways, that's the problem. That, you know, if you want to be a country that can cope with the heat, you start 100 years ago. You build properties that are tailored to the climate that those properties are going to exist in. And we haven't. For 150 years, we've been throwing up houses, very nice houses, but houses that are designed, for coal fires in quite a lot of the houses from the era that Mike's talking about. And that's a lot of houses. And B, for climates where it never gets this hot, or if it does, it's just a couple of days, scorchio, everyone has a grand time, sticks a hanky on their head and then talks about it for the next decade. That's changed. What are we going to do? Thank you, Mike. That was a lovely start. It's taken us up to 10:29, so I won't squeeze Clayton into the remaining 45 seconds or so, because I can see from my screen that Clayton wants to have a crack at both questions. Be more Clayton, is my advice to you. Don't just go for the nice chat about hankies on the head and strawberry mivies, but go for the question about why the media isn't talking about it either. 03456060973 if you want to join in. The Express, the Financial Times did quite well. I'll just run you through the newspapers you should be reading if you are interested in the reality that we're experiencing. The FT scored highest on relating extreme heats to the climate, with nearly 2/3 making the link. That's 50 out of 78. The Guardian came next with roughly half. Unfortunately, I think the Express, no surprises, was the worst. And the Mirror wasn't great either. More than 300 heatwave stories in the Daily Mirror, but only 1 in 10, so only 30 of them mentioned the climate. Why is that happening? And what are we actually going to do? I wish I could do that as a phone-in every day. Here's a topic. Here's James. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? 03456060973. Well, we're going to go to Dominic Ellis now for the headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 33 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where two stories are sort of not cancelling each other out exactly, but they're not really complementing each other either. Most UK media stories about the record-breaking heatwave that struck in June completely failed to mention the climate crisis. Why? And then, while completely failing to mention the climate crisis, I'm also asking you, as a member of the UK media, what are we going to do? Seriously, if this is the new normal, what are we going to do? You know Keith, who I talk about, and you're not quite sure whether he really exists or not, he's got awnings. I didn't even know this. He's given me pictures of them. So if it's 35 degrees outside, it will be about... If it's 30 degrees outside, it'll be about 35 degrees inside his flat, right? So he got some awnings. Now, on average, it's going to be between 7 to 10 degrees lower. 7 to 10 degrees lower by dint of having awnings. He's got manual awnings, but he's got remote control curtains. He calls them smart curtains. I prefer remote control curtains. He's got remote control curtains, which means that he can open and close the curtains from work. So he can open and close the curtains according to where the sun is, which is what you're supposed to do, but of course you can't because you're at work. But if you've got remote control curtains, you can close the curtains when the sun is shining on the window and then open them again when things are cooling down a bit. And he hasn't got remote control windows, but these are the answers. These are the sort of things we might need. You can have remote control windows on your car. Why can't you have them on your house? Remote control windows, or smart windows as the kids call them. It's all remote control. They only call it smart so that it doesn't sound like you're driving a car around your grandma's sitting room. Remote control curtains. That's the future. And awnings. What about remote control awnings, Keith? You'd need the wiring, wouldn't you? If you're just tuning in, it's possible I've got heat stroke. Clayton's in Saffron Walden. Clayton, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello, Clayton.
I had to phone in when you mentioned your dawning moment. Because I've had one recently.
Oh, yes.
But I think I better quickly describe what's going on. So we moved into an Edwardian house a couple of years ago, and the previous owners 20 years ago built an extension out the back, which is a west-facing garden, to let in all the light.
Oh, lovely.
So the back of the house is covered in glazing, looks like a greenhouse, and gets the sun from midday all the way through to sunset.
And 20 years ago, that would have been an absolute winner.
Exactly. But this year and last year, when it was 40 degrees, it turns the kitchen and the bottom part of the house into a furnace.
Yeah.
So to cope with it, I used to separate the kitchen from the rest of the house. And so when you're in the old part of the house, it's cool. And when you go into the kitchen, it's like stepping off a plane onto the tarmac in Greece.
Yeah, got it.
That's the difference. This weekend, on Friday, we had some solar film installed on all of the west-facing glass in the basement area, and it's an absolute game changer.
Is it?
Yeah.
So what does it do? Reflect the sun back off? You can still see through it?
Yeah. It's ever so slightly tinted, and it reflects 80% of the heat and 99% of the UV rays. And
wow.
Now we leave the doors open and it remains temperate. It's like having it's upstairs, all the curtains are shut where the sun is facing. But in this glazed area, there are no curtains. But it's more effective than the curtains because it reflects it at the window, almost like having blinds on the outside.
And any downsides?
No, none. Well, we had to pay for it.
Yeah, of course you did.
That's the downside.
How much did it cost, roughly? I mean, like per metre? No.
A couple of K.
Okay, all in.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's worth it.
The 2 layers from Durham were brilliant. And,
well, they came down from Durham to do it.
They were touring. They do it every week, apparently. They were saying it's his company, and they go around the country putting up solar film for people that are suffering the same as we were.
Yeah, buy shares in that. You'd want to, wouldn't you? So these are window films, solar films. I'm just looking at them now, and they do, as you say, that you're looking at a 99% of UV rays, and you feel a difference within 10 minutes of them going up then, presumably.
The moment they started going up, I mean, it was a hot day, so but the following day we had friends round, and everyone's like, can't believe you've got all this glass and the sun's beating down, we're not hot.
That's an absolute winner. This is why we're having this phone in. Go on then, have a crack at the other question, because you've got 10 out of 10 on the first one.
Well, you've pretty much answered it, and I think it's the obvious answer. I think that we've got a very high percentage of the press shilling for the right wing and the oil companies, and so they can't admit that there's climate change out there because they'd have to admit that they're wrong.
Yeah, I suppose so, which would explain why the FT and the Guardian are the ones that are doing the most coverage of the actual climate crisis. And the Mirror have got questions to answer. I don't think they're doing the shilling for the fossil fuel lobby. Maybe they're just sort of patronising their readers a little bit. The Daily Mail, about a fifth. So of the Daily Mail's 300 stories mentioned global heating. So probably, yeah, I mean that's definite. I'll give you 52% of the answer. The other 48% might be, it's hard to make it sexy. Is, you know, this. I know it sounds odd, but I'm really enjoying conversations about solar film and Mike's the benefit of Mike's experience as a builder. Whereas a conversation about the climate crisis during the heat wave would just land differently, wouldn't it? Regardless of who you were trying to keep in the good books of.
Of course, it's uncomfortable reading because people don't. I mean, to make changes. Is one thing, but to a lot of people now, they're like, they can't afford to make the changes. They don't know how to make changes that would save them money in the long run.
Yeah.
And the obvious solutions, which people go to, like aircon units and stuff, are not necessarily the right answer if we don't use the correct energy.
No, of course not. And you're right. I didn't want to be glib when you mentioned that it cost a couple of grand. I fully appreciate that for a lot of people listening. That moves it immediately into the territory of dreamland. Absolutely no chance of freeing up a couple of grand anytime soon. But it's Vimes's boots. This is the point that Clayton makes, the classic Terry Pratchett observation about Vimes's boots, which is, if I remember it correctly, the idea is that if you haven't got much ready cash, then you will buy cheap boots. And you will need to replace your cheap boots every year or every couple of years because they're cheap. Whereas if you have money, you will buy expensive boots. But over the course of 20 years, you will spend less money on boots than the bloke who's buying cheap boots because you will not need to replace them at all over 20 years. It's one of my all-time favourite political insights, economic insights, Vimes's boots in Terry Pratchett's Discworld series, because it's so true. So if you've got a couple of grand free, you can do this thing. If you haven't, you can't. So you might spend money on a really energy inefficient cooler that you might be able to pick up for 100 quid or something, and it won't make much difference and it'll cost you a fortune to run, but it will make enough difference for you to think that it's worth it. And already you're spending more money over the course of 20 years than Clayton in Saffron Walden is over because it's a one-off payment for the solar film. I'm just going to check with Keith on something. A few of you pointing out that you do know Keith exists because you can hear him bellowing Dominic Ellis or Amelia Cox in my ear through the headphones occasionally. Have you heard of solar film? Did you look into it? I'm worried it might be a bit too tinted. It is 10:41 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. James is in Wilmslow. James, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. Absolutely delighted to speak to you for the first time.
Welcome, welcome.
I think this business of the straightforward narrative that says there's only a certain percentage of these climate things and that's down to a kind of right-wing agenda.
Yes.
I think it's really convenient because what it allows you to do is to go, there's a culprit that's hiding the underlying reasons for us, right?
Yes, yes.
I think the kind of question you need to ask is, if you think about the baseline, which is how many of our other news stories don't discuss underlying causes anyway?
Quite a lot.
And if you think precisely, so to me, one of the things that we should all be thinking is so much of our news is filled with stories about who's the culprit, who did it, who can we hold accountable. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But once you start getting into root causes, and this is something I'm kind of very passionate about, you start to get to the question of, well, you'll get why and you'll get why. And it feels like you're sort of unraveling some spaghetti. And I think the question starts to become about patience. Now, I don't know whether this says something about how the Guardian and the FT judge their readership, but it's like they might have the patience to go a little bit further into the whys and whys and whys. But, you know, this gets quite deep for people. Like, it was a little bit of fossil fuel, it's a little bit of political choices, etc. And I think that's why people day to day end up thinking, well, where's this all going and what am I going to do about it?
So I'm fascinated by the incurious. I think an awful lot of our political problems in recent years have been caused by the incurious, people who aren't really interested in the why of things. And yet you remind us that we're probably all susceptible to that to varying degrees. And then, of course, there's complexity fatigue, I suppose you could call it, in that you want to think about something and you want to understand something, but the more data that is put in front of you, the more your eyelids droop sometimes.
Yeah, and there's quite a famous phrase in root cause analysis, which is what you call the root cause is just where you've decided to stop.
Oh, I love that.
Right? It's by a guy called Sidney Dekker.
Is that, wow.
And it gets you into this whole question of, if you really want to understand why things are happening, and we use it all the time in debate, we say things like, oh, there's a systemic problem. But I think one of the things that's tricky is, so what does practically a systemic problem look like in a way I can get my head around? And I think that's partly, we talk about causes, but like, when's it ever going to end? And I think we could talk about this all day, and you haven't got time for that. But I think that this is what we tend to do, is settle on a why.
I love that
assuages our anxiety and gives us a satisfying round off.
So that's what it is, and everyone's guilty of that. Even
it's part of the mix.
Even people who think they're on the right side of history might say, "Oh, it's Russian interference," or it's a right-wing conspiracy. I occasionally probably lay far too much responsibility at the doors of Tufton Street lobby groups masquerading as think tanks for the country's malaise, because the real answers are going to go deeper and go further than that. Give me that phrase again. The root cause is what?
The root cause of something is simply where you stopped looking, by a guy called Sidney Dekker.
Or thinking. It's where you stopped looking.
Indeed.
Well, I'm going to recommend another book. I don't know if you're aware of it. It's called Beyond the 5 Whys by James C. Patterson.
That is indeed my book.
Hey! Root cause analysis and systems thinking.
And if you want a good dinner party discussion about why did the Titanic sink, icebergs, lifeboats, etc., that's a chapter in my book.
Oh, how interesting! Because of course, where you stop looking is, for most people and for history itself, the iceberg.
Exactly, the immediate cause.
The immediate cause. Wow. Yeah. I wasn't joking. This really is James C. Patterson. Eleanor gave me a heads up. I'm not completely psychic. Beyond the 5 Whys, root cause analysis and systems thinking, which probably nudges you into the territory this hour of being an Uber caller, James.
Well done about that. But thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you for your insights and indeed for the further reading as well. The time now is 10:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
48, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Do you want to know something lovely? And I hope that I can communicate this in a way that will charm you, even if you don't listen to the programme on a very regular basis, or even if you're tuning in today for the first time. But you heard me at the top of the show wanging on about Ash in Northampton, who is an Uber caller. We need a better name than Uber caller, because it makes everybody's making the same joke, saying, I'll be an Uber caller, James. I'll be with you in 9 minutes. I need a better name than that. But anyway, callers whose qualifications to comment on a subject are sensational or way beyond what you might expect. The kind of people who other radio programmes ring up and ask to come on. Somehow we've managed to create a space in which on this show they're more likely to ring us and accept my invitation to come on. So I was talking about Ash, who is our resident Strait of Hormuz expert and has provided us with, frankly, extraordinary insights, and every prediction he's made has come true, and we need to catch up with him again sooner rather than later. But while we were talking to James, who turned out, of course, to be James C. Patterson, the author of Beyond the 5 Whys, Root Cause Analysis and Systems Thinking, Ash messaged to say, oh my God, I've got his book. So there's two little planets, big planets, there's two planets aligning there in ways that, as the presenter of this programme, make me absolutely joyous. I just love it when that happens, a sense that, I don't know, some mornings you just feel that we're all moving in the same direction, and it's lovely, isn't it? And the reference to Sidney Dekker also causing delight up in Northampton to somebody who would have, perhaps unlike me, understood every single syllable of what James was sharing with us a moment ago. For the rest of us, the questions remain. Why does the media do so little? Spoiler alert, there won't be a simple or singular answer to that question. Why does so much of the coverage ignore the climate crisis? And second, what we're doing, what we're going to do, what can we do? Because Mike in Marlow at the top of the show pointed out that we live in a country that's been built to cope with a climate we no longer have. That's huge when you think about it. So all we can really do is nibble at the edges. In the case of installing insulation, I suppose, almost literally. What can we do? What are you doing? Big breakthrough from Clayton with the idea of solar film, which will be a game changer, is already a game changer for him down in Saffron Walden. But again, it's not going to be of much use to people who haven't got the cash to afford it. I mean, and it will work in any window, won't it? So if you're in a sort of high-rise block with old metal windows, that your home presumably is heating up like an oven at the moment, and that would help a lot. But it is, if you like, it's an alleviation of a symptom rather than a solution to a problem. Tom's in Woking. Tom, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. Nice to be with you again. I work for, and have worked for 28 years, for a major shading manufacturer here in the UK, and I also sit on the technical working group of the British Blinds and Shutters Association. What's been going on this morning has been absolutely brilliant about bringing this to everyone's attention, because your first caller was absolutely right. We are still designing houses for an environment that existed 30 plus years ago, and it just doesn't work right now. In particular, we've got highly insulated homes. We've got glazing that is designed to retain heat in buildings, going all the way back to the oil crisis of the early 70s.
Oh, is that right?
Because oil crisis hit, energy, which had been cheap and plentiful, was suddenly very expensive. And so we lived in very drafty housing stock, very drafty offices, so we had to stop the heat loss. And one of the first things that was done was to change the type of glazing we were using. So we moved from single glazing to double glazing to triple glazing to glazing that's filled with inert gases, and then to glazing that had an invisible coating on one of the interior faces of the unit.
Interior.
So, and what that did was it keeps the heat in. Now, the problem is the climate we have now is not that climate, but our buildings are still designed to be airtight.
And we can't knock them down and start again. We can't knock them down. So what can we do?
So we need to do a two-pronged policy, really. We have to help the stock that we have now to cope with the climate we have now. And external shading, which will always be the most efficient form of shading to stop heat gain, because you're stopping the solar radiation before it enters the building.
Yes.
But it's expensive.
Yes.
It's quite complex to install. So sometimes, and again, question of budget, question of opportunity, internal shading is what's available, and that's where my company works. And you can have internal shading that will prevent the vast majority of the solar radiation getting into the body of the room.
What is it physically, internal shading?
So generally, for heat control, it's generally a roller blind.
Oh, okay.
It's generally a roller blind. We want to look for light colours. Ideally, if it can have a reflective coating on the face that faces
on the
out
outside,
of the building,
yes,
even better. But the problem is,
it's
with
dark.
the type of building, no, because we use screen fabrics that have something like a 3% open weave. So if you sort of hold your fingers meshed together and pull them apart slightly, that gives you the openness of the weave. Okay. So if we
you love your work, don't you, Tom?
I do love my work.
I love a man who loves his work.
I lecture, if I'm doing a lecture like this lunchtime, I lecture to architects and design practices.
I can tell.
Talking exactly
You're a
about
natural.
this.
You're an absolute natural, all day long.
Yeah, so what we want to do is we want to do several things. We want to stop the heat gain or lower the heat gain in the building. We want to retain our vision of the outside world because we want to, A, use lots of natural light coming into our buildings, which is good for us, and also prevents us using up carbon by using artificial light. But we also want to control glare as well, because we live in a screen-dominated society.
Yes.
You know, whether it's our phones, our laptops, our big TV screens, everywhere we go got a screen. And if we have too much light coming in, we get glare, which is bad for our eyes. So it's a three-way solution we need to control.
It was two a minute ago. You've gone from two prongs to three ways.
I've added one.
That's inflation.
I've done it on the shuffle. But the problem with the glazing I talked about, if you imagine your solar radiation comes in through the glazing, it hits your reflective blind and bounces back. But Problem, it hits the reflective glazing and the energy can't get out again. So you are setting up a little thermal layer between the blind and the glazing. So the way forward is to look at still using double and triple glazed, inert gas-filled glazing, but without the reflective coating. So if you're reflecting the solar radiation from your internal blind, it can then pass back out through the glazing.
But it will get a bit colder in winter still.
Well, the interesting thing is there's been a brilliant project up at Salford University called the eHome and the eHome 2 projects. They have demonstrated that certain types of internal shading can be up to 35% insulative. So in other words, it can act as insulation in winter.
Oh, okay.
And this goes back to something my dear old mum taught me in the oil crisis, that at night time, in the winter, you go upstairs, you close your curtains, you tuck them above the radiator to retain your heat. And then during the day in winter, you keep your shading open, so you harvest whatever solar radiation you can to help heat your room. Then in the summer, it's the reverse.
You do the exact opposite. This is amazing. What was the name of the council you sit on?
It's the British Blinds and Shutters Association.
BBS.
Now,
BBSA.
BBSA.
How many people sit on the council of the British Blinds and Shutters Association?
It's open to the whole membership. It's open to anyone who works in shading. But our technical working group has about 8 or 9 people.
Yeah, that's good.
Representing different manufacturers. We've got the brilliant Dr. Zoe de Grusa, who is the expert in all these things. But importantly, for the listeners and for anyone who wants to learn more about how you control heat gain in your buildings, there is a website called shadeit.org.
All one word, Shadeit.
Shadeit.org.
Oh, bless you,
BBSA's own website. You can go there and it tells you absolutely everything you need to know.
You've been waiting your entire life for this phone in, Tom.
James, I am so passionate about this. I actually semi-retired with my company a couple of years ago, and I work 16 hours a week for them now, just talking to the trade, talking to anyone who'll listen.
Because there's stuff that we can do. There's stuff that we can do. You're an evangelist. You're an evangelist. This is magnificent. All right, a tough one for you now, mate.
Go on.
Do you want, because we've taken a vote and you've qualified, do you want a Ray Liotta or do you want a free advert for your company? Because you can't have both.
Oh, God. I'm so sorry to my company. I've listened to you for 20 years. A Ray Liotta, my life is complete.
That is the right answer.
I'm Ray Liotta, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. If you build it, they will come.
Oh, my God.
Oh, go on. What's the company called? Quickly.
My company is called Silent Gliss Limited. We're a Swiss company. We manufacture in Broadstairs in Kent, and this is our business.
Silent what?
Silent Gliss, Gliss.
Good job I checked. And I wouldn't have done it the other way around. If you'd gone for the free advert, you wouldn't have got the Ray Liotta. But I've given away the game now, so I can't do that again. Bless you, Tom. That was brilliant. And actually addressing so much of the issue that I was trying to communicate, the utility of, the usefulness of having this conversation, because there will be lots of things you can do. Kicked off rather perfectly by Clayton in Saffron Walden, but flipping heck, the Jude Bellingham role on this phone-in has been taken by Tom in Woking when it comes to the actual practical things you can do and the reality of it. And remember that shadeit.org website to find out more. And James, I can't remember where James was, James C. Patterson, the author, he would be the Thomas Tuchel almost in this analogy, which probably needed a little bit more work before I shared it on the radio. But there it is, glorious vindication of the decision to conduct that conversation in 2 ways. It's coming up to 11 o'clock. Conversation next is one to which we have turned our attention many times in the past and to which we need to turn our attention again. And it's a conversation that actually changes every time we return to it, because it shouldn't be as big an issue now as it is, precisely because when we started talking about it, we thought that one of the main reasons why it was such a big problem was because we didn't talk about it enough. So why are our children still so unhealthy?
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 11, it's Shade It. Not with a T, IT on the end, not shaded, just for the avoidance of doubt. Laura made me chuckle during the break. I feel robbed, James. My mum didn't teach me anything during the oil crisis, says Laura in Renfrew. Speaking of mums, And now I'm haunted by James's book, Beyond the Five Whys, Root Cause Analysis and Systems Thinking, and the idea of the root cause of a problem being the point where you stopped looking. Oh, that'll do. Oh, it's all because parents are both working. Why are our children all so unhealthy? Oh, junk food. Lazy parents. It's like the opposite of tabloid thinking, isn't it? This idea that you should carry on searching for causes because there won't be one root cause, there'll be myriad causes. Kind of, would you allow me to suggest it's kind of what we try to do on this show, as opposed to the shows or the corners of the media where they pretend that there is one simple answer to a whole host of complicated problems? I don't know. But anyway, we turn our attention next to the fact that the United Kingdom is on track to raise one of the unhealthiest generations of children in decades. This is a report from the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health, and it means that the UK now has some of the worst outcomes for children in Europe. In some ways, the most depressing element of this report is the fact that many of the conditions that are being recorded are or were once largely associated with adulthood. This is an inquiry called the State of Child Health 2026. Inequalities between deprived and privileged communities are huge, and the report highlights the impact that those inequalities have upon the health of the deprived children or the children from deprived communities. Even, simple things like access to medical care, but they're also looking at infant mortality, child mortality, immunisations, early childhood development, oral health, obesity, mental health, emotional health and well-being, vaping and smoking. Got kids who've become addicted to their parents' vapes, asthma, substance misuse and injuries. One doctor told researchers, the youngest child I have looked at was a 6-year-old with severe bronchiectasis found using their parents' vape on the ward. So presumably that means the parents came in to visit their 6-year-old and allowed the kid to have a puff on their vape. These are extreme examples, and they're not going to be part of the broader answer, if you like, to the bigger question, because what we're looking at is every single major indicator in this country, obesity, mental illness, tooth decay and vaccine uptake, now either declining or stalling. I've got a horrible feeling this is the same question as the one we asked in the last hour, isn't it? Why? No, it's not. It's the opposite. Because in the last hour we were saying, how come we're never talking about the climate crisis when we're talking about the consequences? Whereas these days we talk more than we have ever talked about children's health, about children's mental health, about children's obesity. Maybe not that big on tooth decay. But everything else, vaccines, I've never had as many conversations about vaccines in the last few years, for obvious reasons, as I have in the previous 20. What's going on? What is going on? I had a bit of a thought when I was away. This is always dangerous. But it occurred to me that when they opened the comment sections on newspapers, something, and this is quite a tricky thing for a journalist to explain because it will sound a little bit pompous, but I think you're probably used to that by now. It created a marketplace for opinions that hadn't been very well thought through. The problem with this position is that some of the best paid and most famous columnists in the country are dangerous idiots. You know, I still think of old Dick Littlejohn at the Daily Mail explaining why he'd never been more ashamed to be British because Keir Starmer had declined to join Donald Trump's war in Iran, which you will be aware is still going on. I've lost count of the number of ceasefires he's announced. But the idea that someone paid for their opinions can end up being so completely boiled makes the observation that I'm making at the moment about the comment sections on newspapers a little bit tricky to sustain. If the paid columnists are as bigger idiots as Richard Littlejohn, then how can I sit here saying, well, all the problems really started when we started allowing ordinary people to express their idiotic opinions with a sort of patina of plausibility on websites. But I think the central point holds. You started treating opinions that were not remotely evidence-based or a consequence of critical thinking as an equal and opposite balance to opinions that were based on thinking. So you would think first of climate change, just to nod back to the last hour, and the way in which you would watch on the BBC even, not just on the less responsible platforms, you would watch all the scientists in the world queuing up to talk about the climate crisis, and then on the other side of the table you would have, it used to be the late Nigel Lawson, who, as far as I'm aware, had no scientific qualifications whatsoever, but he was absolutely adamant that climate change was not real. And then during the pandemic, and this is the thing I was thinking about on holiday, so forgive me if it falls apart halfway through me sharing it with you. During the pandemic, what had happened to journalism happened to medicine. I'd never thought of this before. So if... And of course, you saw the consequences of it happening to journalism during Brexit. And Emily points out very powerfully what she calls the Minford paradigm. So you'd have almost every economist worthy of the name queuing up to explain that leaving the European Union would be very bad for our economy. And you had a bloke called Patrick Minford insisting that it wouldn't. And every time there was a television debate or a radio debate, you'd have one person representing 99% of scientific opinion and one person representing 1% of scientific opinion, and you'd be left as a viewer or a listener thinking that that was a 50-50 or, God forbid, a 52-48 debate. So that's when it happened to journalism. And in a sense to science, because it's most people's experience of the science comes through the journalism. But then during the pandemic, it happened to medicine. It happened to medicine in that you would have people going on Facebook or going on websites with zero qualifications. Can you have less than zero qualifications? Can you actually be... I suppose you can. If you're ambivalent about something, if you admit, I don't really know anything, if you insist that something that is false is true, then in a sense you've gone below zero. So zero qualifications to comment on something would involve admitting that you know, don't listen to me, I don't know anything. But then you've got someone over there going, oh no, you must listen to me. I know that vaccines contain microchips that are designed to population control. And you think I'm joking. At least I hope you think I'm joking, because that would mean you haven't been exposed to these people in the wild. But the internet during the pandemic was absolutely groaning under the weight of people who were convinced that the vaccines that we were finally able to access were all part of some global conspiracy to control the population, that 5G phone masts were spreading the virus. So it happened to medicine during the pandemic. The idea that authority no longer mattered. And part of the problem for this lies with authority. For not having fought its corner better, or for having made avoidable mistakes, or for having missed the scale of the emergency that it was facing. An appeal to authority. That's a phrase, that, isn't it? It probably comes from Latin originally. You appeal to authority. If you're having an argument about something, you appeal to authority. And the qualifications for authority, not unlike the qualifications for a Ray Liotta, involve demonstrable mastery of your subject. And that's all gone in our society, I sometimes fear. That's all gone. You know, you've got alleged rapists who are holed up somewhere in Romania taking to social media to talk about a crime that's been committed in Southport, and Nigel Farage jumping up and down saying that we've got to pay attention to the alleged rapist and ignore the police. That the authority has been broken online and now it's seeped into reality as well. There's no such thing as authority. You can't trust authority. You can't trust judges. You can't trust the police. You can't trust professors. You can't trust experts. The appeal to authority has been broken, partly because of the internet and partly because of deeply, deeply dangerous and irresponsible public figures. Some of them are columnists, some of them are politicians, some of them are quite possibly both. And I don't know why I found myself thinking about that this morning when I with a heavy heart, turned to the story about the UK currently raising one of the unhealthiest generations of children in decades. But I did. Because who are these parents supposed to trust? Jamie Oliver takes quite a lot of abuse from media institutions for the crime of caring more about some children's health than their own parents can. Why Who are these parents supposed to trust? I mean, how much of the blame lies with the parents? All of it? Probably. But blame is such a weird word. I remember I am absolutely haunted now by that phrase that James shared with us in the last hour about the root cause just being the point at which you stopped looking. But I've always had this image in my head, I've even written about it, of a young mum who is not very well educated but loves the bones of her baby, wheeling her pushchair from the bus stop home and going past, 20 billboards, 10 billboards, all extolling the wonderfulness of fizzy drinks or crisps or chocolate bars or whatever it may be, burgers, all of that. There's nothing wrong with advertising. I'd be an absolute hypocrite if I argued that there was. But scale, economies of scale. So the mum wheeling home her baby, going past billboard after billboard after billboard, extolling the wonderfulness of cheesy burgers and crispy fries and delicious deep-fried snacks and sugar-loaded corn syrup-laden fizzy drinks and delicious sweets and fruity treats and all the things that used to be enjoyed in moderation by children. Who had Friday sweets? Did you have Friday sweets as a kid? Tempe. I'm quite old. I'm older than I look. 10p, down to the corner shop, spend it on sweets, and he'd have a little selection. You remember? You could get one of those. I'll have a fried egg. 4 Mojos you could get when I was little for a penny, not 2. That's inflation. And you know, Friday sweets. I don't know if that's the right way to do it or the wrong way to do it or a healthy way to do it, but you couldn't buy a bag of crisps. The first time I went to the United States of America, I kind of had an almost religious experience regarding the size of the crisp packets. I wanted a packet of crisps. You know, like a lunchbox size packet of crisps, a packet of Walker's crisps or Golden Wonders, a normal size packet of crisps. Couldn't find one for love or money. Wandering up and down the supermarket aisles thinking, well, there must be, because all the bags are enormous, so there must be an enormous bag of little bags. Can I just buy, excuse me, I'd like to buy some crisps, please. Sorry, what, sir? Sorry, chips. I'd like to buy some potato chips. Could you direct me to some potato chips? Yeah, it's aisle 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9. Yeah, I just want a little bag of potato chips. I just want a small one-person portion bag. I might as well have been talking Chinese. Something there. I had another moment at Bangkok Airport, of all places. I told you about this. The first time I've ever encountered a Dairy Queen, which is a kind of ice cream milkshake franchise, often to be found alongside Burger King. You see what they did there. And I was on quite strong medication because I had an ear infection after swimming. So I was a bit, I think the correct word that the kids use is trippy. I was a little bit trippy, and I'm standing at this franchise in Bangkok Airport looking at the pricing and thinking, how can a litre be... If a small cup is like 5 baht, how can a litre of it only be 10 baht? I'm making up the numbers. Right, but I'm thinking, so a small cup is a fraction of a litre, and that's 5 baht. How can a litre tub, who can eat a litre of ice cream in one sitting? Well, all of us, actually, but you take my point. Who should be eating a litre of ice cream in one sitting? Spoiler alert, none of us. So I'm looking, and again, I had this moment of just thinking, God, we're absolutely screwed, aren't we? Because I'm looking at that thinking, oh, I'll get a litre. Look at that, what a bargain. 5 baht for 25 mils or whatever it is. What would it be? 75 mils? I don't know. 5 baht for 100 mils. 10 baht for 1,000 mils. That's such a bargain. I'll have a litre, please, of ice cream. And I'll have some sprinkles as well and some add-ons. And can I have some peanut? I think I'm getting a bargain. But, of course, what I realised was it must be so cheap to make that they're making a profit. By the time they've paid for the cup and the spoon and the rent on the thing, the actual stuff coming out of the nozzle is negligible. They can practically give it away. They can give you a litre of it for twice the price of what they'll give you for 100. They'll give what you'll pay for 100 mils. So there's so many answers to this question. I just want you to tell me what yours are. And what I want to do, I think the way to do this, the way to find focus during conversations like this is to look at the UK, because this is supposed to be now the most globalised, the planet has ever been. You should really not be finding massive disparities between populations. I can see why you'd have massive disparities according to privilege and deprivation, but why would you still have massive depravities? Why would you have Freudian slip? Why would you still have massive disparities according to geography? Why would this country be doing so badly on these measures? Do you want to make comparisons with other countries? I have found that so helpful in the past. I've got this kind of iconography in my mind of contributions to the programme that have really helped me understand things better. And that I remember when we were sent by a mum whose child is at school in France, and we were just sent the weekly menu of what they were going to get for their lunch at a school in France. And it was extraordinarily different to what you would get in most schools in this country, probably not the private schools, but in the state sector. The idea of multiple courses, always having a fruit and a option and all of that. So that's part of the reason. That's part of the reason. My tummy is rumbling, as a few of you have pointed out, because I'm talking about food. I'll have some of my overnight oats during the next hiatus, during the next hydration break. But what I want you to tell me next is the specifics to the United Kingdom. The specifics to the United Kingdom. Why are our children so unhealthy? Why are the measures regarding obesity, mental illness, tooth decay and vaccine uptake so much lower than comparable countries in the same hemisphere, in the same economic orbit, in the same universe? Why is the United Kingdom suffering on these fronts? 0345 6060 973. Is the number you need. So I know what all the answers can be. If you stop looking for root causes, then your root cause will become the point at which you stopped looking. But vaccines, why would we be doing worse on vaccine uptake? Why would we be doing worse on vaping? Why would we be doing worse on obesity, mental illness, tooth decay? What is it about this country right now that you think explains our performance, our incredibly poor, our shameful performance? And what can we do about it? Because I'll tell you something for nothing. To take James's point about the root cause being the point at which you stopped looking, the idea that this is all about lazy parents or even that it's all about lobby groups and so-called think tanks shilling for the big sugar and the big junk food companies, it's going to be so much more nuanced and complicated than that. But what is quite straightforward is the nation-specific question. What is it about this country that explains these figures? What is it about the United Kingdom right now that means infant mortality, child mortality, immunisations, early childhood development, oral health, obesity, mental health, emotional health and well-being, vaping and smoking, asthma and substance misuse and injuries, see us perform worse on most, if not all, of those fronts compared to countries with which we have an awful lot in common? And I'll tell you whatever you've got on this. No one's going to have the comprehensive, definitive answer, but let's just make a list. And it's got to be peculiar to the UK, which means it may help for you to make comparisons with other countries as well. But you don't have to. What is it about this country that explains these numbers? It's 11:22.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 11. Sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent in the first hour about in the introduction there, been the death of authority. I think it's crucial to what we're talking about, but it's not necessarily going to be the best way into this conversation. What I want you to do is tell me what hits you about the United Kingdom. So you come here having spent some time abroad, or you come here to live for the first time, having lived somewhere else, or you have lived overseas for a long time and you come back to Britain. And on the specific territory of children's health, what hit you first? What hit you hardest? You literally went, oh my goodness, I can't believe they do that. I'll give you an example. Motorway service stations. If you visit a motorway service station in France, then your options for food are unrecognisable compared to the options that you'll find here. Particularly if you confine yourself to the petrol station bit without going into the food hall. I was going through one of my sporadic health tips a few years ago, and I really wanted to buy an apple. I wanted to buy one apple. I didn't want to go into the food hall area. I just wanted to get some petrol and some water and a snack. And the snack that I thought that I wanted was an apple. So I went in and I could not find an apple. Don't message me to tell me that you bought an apple in a petrol station yesterday. The point is, I'm telling you the truth, I couldn't find one. You go to a place in France, if you go into the food hall, then you're going to have actual home-cooked food, so to speak, in front of you. You're not going to be loading up on E-numbers and salt and processed food and all the rest of it. And you can swim to France. That's how near it is. So something about this country, I don't know why that is true. I don't know why that is a thing. Why, when I am in France, I can buy healthy food at the roadside, and when I am in the United Kingdom, I can't. But that's the kind of thing I mean. So you can provide me either with the explanation as to why it has happened, 0345 60973, or you can give me your roadside food equivalent. You can give me the thing that teeth. How can our children's teeth be worse now than they were when I was a kid? Answer, government policy in part. Also, parents not taking people to the dentist. Also, parents who want to go to the dentist not being able to find a dentist. Just because you know it, don't think that other people listening don't. It's about putting together a long list, a proper tapestry of what we're doing wrong in this country to explain why we are currently on track to raise one of the unhealthiest generations of children in decades. So it's compared to the past and it's compared to other countries. Mina is in Newin. Mina, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
How are you?
Very well, thanks. What have you got?
We have a 3-year-old. So ever since we gave birth to him, I think I'm being really, really conscious of what's available out there in the supermarket, what we cook at home, and what we eat when we go out.
Yeah.
So I'm actually from Hong Kong. So I grew up in Hong Kong. I grew up in the UK. So growing up, there will always be fresh food and vegetables served on the table, shared by the family. Whereas here, I noticed quite a lot of my friends or family, they would just cook whatever easy, put in a microwave, put in the air fryer, put in the oven, and then serve the kids first. But for us, it's really important to have a meal every night with our little one. Even, ever since he was 6 months old when he was weaning, what he eats and what we eat. So obviously now he's almost 3. Sorry.
No, don't worry. You're doing brilliantly. I'm just thinking that when I was his age, that was normal here. You would almost always eat together, you as a family, at least once a day, and you would almost always have fresh food. And the things that have changed, because you've touched on it, with microwaves and air fryers and the rest of it, the things that have changed are technological, and they've changed everywhere. So why in Hong Kong did people resist the temptation of sticking stuff in a microwave or parking their children in front of a ready meal, whereas in this country we didn't resist it? That's the mystery, isn't it, Mina?
Yeah, I think because it's the culture that the parents or the grandparents go to the wet market every day and get something fresh from the market every day. So they go shopping every day. Whereas here, you probably go once a week. I go once a week, but I tend to buy all the vegetables and meat and then plan my week meals. Don't get me wrong, I've got frozen stuff as well. It's just probably for me more than for my child. But, and also I see restaurants as well. I think parents are not just to blame. Some are busy, some are probably lazy, and they're probably not too inspired. If the kids refuse to eat, they probably just, I'll just stick whatever they would eat into an oven, so then just to kind of feed them.
None of this gives us the specifics of the UK, because all of these, these are human conditions. A little bit of laziness, a little bit of acquiescence in the face of objection. These shouldn't be peculiar to the UK, but they are. I wonder if the thing you've said about shops, Hong Kong is an incredibly populated island, isn't it? So
yeah.
You don't need to drive for 2 miles to go to a big out-of-town shop and do all of your shopping in one visit. You presumably are going to go to 3 or 4 shops to get your food. You get your fish here and you'll get your vegetables there, and you'll move around more, you'll walk more. So I don't know whether or not there's something in the death of the high street and the rise of the out-of-town shopping centre. Because I'm not just looking at the difference between Gloucestershire and Hong Kong. I'm looking at the difference between being 3 in 2026, like your son, and being 3 in 1975, like me. And that would be one big change, would be the nature of shopping itself. Yeah.
I think it's also the food that's available even in restaurants and pubs. I mean, we don't actually eat in pubs that much because I refuse to pay. It's getting really expensive now, so I refuse to pay for things that I can actually make at home easily and, a healthier version as well. If you look at a kids' meal, probably 95% of the restaurants here are chicken nuggets and chips.
I knew you were going to say nuggets.
Pizza.
I knew you were going to say nuggets.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's on every menu. So.
There's no skill involved whatsoever in heating up some nuggets, and you're going to pay 4 times what you'd pay to have them at home. What would a meal out in Hong Kong involve?
It could be some soup noodles. Mostly when we feed our kids in Hong Kong, we would probably go to a restaurant where it's like family style again. So you get a combination of, some could be stir-fry noodles mixed with vegetables and some meat. It could be soup noodles with also like a clear broth.
See, this sounds oddly, I know that the menu itself would be different, but you're sounding quite Southern European now, as well as Asian, because that idea of different dishes on the table, people making an event of things, it being... We kind of don't do that, except possibly at Sunday lunch in this country. Yeah,
but Sunday lunch, you still kind of serve it to your own plate as well. I mean, I guess. Yeah, that's true. I mean, we eat steamed fish and I guess like you said, in Europe, in Greece, in, Italy. Spain, they all do that as well. So... I don't know. I think it's the culture. I don't know why either.
I wonder if rationing has... we go back to root causes, or we start digging further, whether rationing has there's a legacy of rationing. Mina, that was brilliant. Thank you. I hope you call me again. 11:32 is the time. On a completely different note, big news. Absolutely huge world exclusive coming up after the news. You'll be aware that the World Cup is going on. I have a football exclusive for you after this. It's visual, so I don't know what we've done. Have we arranged? Will people be able to watch it live, or will they have to watch it back later? Okay, this isn't the most radio-friendly exclusive that you're ever going to experience in your lives, but it is, when it goes up later on YouTube and elsewhere, it is going to blow your mind. Not only is it a football exclusive, a world football exclusive on the James O'Brien programme on LBC, but also it has a very tangential link to Jude Bellingham. How about that? A tangential link to Jude Bellingham and a world-exclusive football-related story coming up on LBC with me after the very latest headlines with Dominic Ellis.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:35 and the world-exclusive football-related story with a tangential link to Jude Bellingham is now live on LBC. But unless you can see me, which you can't, you won't know what it is. Would you like to take a guess? Go on, text me on 84850 or WhatsApp 0345 606 0973. See if you can guess what the world-exclusive football story with a tangential link to Jude Bellingham that is currently unfolding live on your radio, but you don't know that for certain because you can't see me. Have a guess at what that story is. And it is genuinely a world exclusive, and it does genuinely have a tangential link to Jude Bellingham, and it is genuinely about football. See if you can knit that together and come up with an answer. And I will, before 11:45, I will do the big reveal. And then I will post it online visually, so that you can actually see the world exclusive from football with a tangential link to Jude Bellingham that is now breaking live, breaking news, capital letters, breaking, on LBC. But before that, back to the arguably slightly more interesting topic of why the United Kingdom performs so badly on children's health, on all measures as well, pretty much. What is it about this era and this country that explains this tragedy? Angus is in Milan. Angus, what would you like to say?
Oh, good morning, James. Thank you for taking my call on a really fascinating topic. Food is at the heart of it, obviously. Everybody knows about the Italian diet, the Mediterranean diet, and that's a big thing. I think when I come back to the UK, what shocks me is what people are shoveling into their kids. You sit on a train and you see some poor kids having a packet of crisps and a Mars bar and a fizzy drink laid out.
You don't see that in Italy?
Not really. No,
really?
No,
I
not really.
believe you. I mean, just because chocolate is available doesn't mean that it's not the go-to snack. Every station is forcing it upon you. Every transport hub is just essentially telling you to buy a bag of hydrogenated fat and a box of sugar.
It's here and it's available, but it's not the first point choice that people go to. I'd love to just hark back to the previous caller who mentioned Sunday lunch. Now, Sunday lunch is a ritual that everybody loves. And what is different about Sunday lunch is you make an effort. You go out together, maybe as a family, you choose the piece of meat, the veggies you like, and it's really important. For Italians, every meal is important. And it's a really deeply rooted thing.
Where does that come from?
Good choice. That's a good question. I mean, it's
we always like that, because you think about the old meat and two veg trope when I was young. I mean, it was. I mean, maybe our food just wasn't very nice. Could that be part of it?
I share that memory, and I also know a lot of Italians who were traumatised as kids coming over to the UK and being subjected to sort of school dinner type food.
And why was that? Because we've got a good farming community. We've got plenty of agrarian land. Why would we? I know that you're going to get nicer tomatoes in Italy, but you're not going to get nicer potatoes. Why would we not have been able to turn what we had into more pleasant fare?
It's a weird conundrum, and actually, if you think about it, we've always had I'm a huge fan of Jamie Oliver and everything that he's done to try to improve, especially in schools. But if you go back in time, the Brits have always been fascinated by TV chefs. But why haven't they adopted those habits and they've taken that as a way forward in the home, in the kitchen at home? You don't want to say laziness, but the supermarkets offer good stuff.
Yeah, so, I mean, we're at a bit of a loss, really. I mean, there are things that are different, but we're haunted by James Patterson now. The root cause is where you stop looking. So, what did we have? I mean, Henry VIII ate very well. I'm just thinking about whether the post-war period, when we started, after rationing, and we're both too young to remember this era, but after rationing, it would be a sign of wealth to be able to buy shop-bought stuff.
Yeah.
Rather than baking your own cake, you'd get a cake from the bakers, or if you were getting shop-bought, it was middle class, and the working class was still cooking their own food. I don't know, I'm thinking out loud. So, and that's a consequence of rationing that is peculiar to this country, and therefore there's a hangover of thinking that what has become processed food, which used to be shop-bought food, which wasn't necessarily unhealthy, but was a mark of having a few quid, a few shillings, that moves to the current era, and we still think that that there's something desirable about buying rather than making, buying rather than cooking. And you would never get that in Italy. In Italy, it would be, and in Greece, and all over Southern Europe, and in France, it would be the exact opposite. Yeah.
There's a lot of pride, actually, in all of the countries you just mentioned, in being a good cook. Men talk about cooking. Men talk about going to buy the right cut of meat or the right piece of cheese. Yeah. So there's a lot of pride that goes into it as well. It's not just slap the easiest thing on the plate for the kids and then off to the pub. That isn't the way it works here.
So there's a bit of, low-level misogyny as well, in that a woman's place is a woman's place is in the kitchen, and therefore the conversation is not conducted in as full and frank a way as it would be. And so that's the thing that hits you first. You come here and the thing you see is the children just eating what would have been a once-a-week special when we were children, and yet is now almost a daily occurrence. And that's not an accident that's happened, the way that it is foisted upon us as absolutely by design rather than by accident. Do you want to have a guess at what my world-exclusive football story with a tangential link to Jude Bellingham is?
Oh, gosh, I was thinking about that before and I lost my... I can't do it.
You got nothing.
Put me on the spot and I can't...
No, that's all right. No. I mean, a couple of people have actually guessed correctly. Richard has guessed correctly.
Welcome, whatever it is, and go England tomorrow night.
There we go.
Well played. Let's sort it out.
Absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong, the World Cup is exciting, but this is a world-exclusive football story with a tangential link to Jude Bellingham. It doesn't get much more exciting than that, mate.
I can't wait.
Well, any minute now, Angus, any minute now. Asma is... Thank you, Angus. Arrivederci. That's not what you say, is it, in Italy? That means hello, I think. Asma is in Barkingside. Asma, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.
I think there's so many factors, some of them which we've touched on before, like, a skill shortage in cooking. Our climate, I think, it lends to like meat and veg and stodgy food and so on. But one of the things that's specific to what's different now to when we were at school, for example, and it's like a big bugbear of mine, I can't believe more people are not enraged, is when kids get to secondary school now, it's not like in our day where, you had to choose something for a main meal, and then you could have pudding if you wanted, and there was some veg on the side. They have like a free access to canteen type food, and there are no limitations. So they could have like a slice of pizza at break time, a burrito and a burger and a waffle and a muffin. And my son's just finished secondary school, and we've had so many words because they use this one fingerprint system, and he's just spent £20 in 3 days on just not even a proper meal.
And there's not a lot you can do about that.
Unless I chopped his finger off or not.
Well, he'd just use a different finger, wouldn't he? They're clever these days, these kids.
Yeah, so I think, when you're a new parent, you do all the reading, you do all the research, and you're, pureeing food. And even when they're in primary school, I'm a fan of Jamie Oliver as well. The food is, small portions but nutritious, and there's a limitation. And then it feels like everything gets undone in school. And, I'm South Asian of descent, so I grew up with food and cooking, and I make most of the stuff from scratch. But he just filled himself up on 3 burgers, and then he
goes on. I know it's a long way off. I don't want to spook you, but then he goes on to raise a family, and the messages he's carrying are mixed. He's carrying one message from home, but a very different message from school, where he will be eating the majority of his meals during his teenage years, and that's got to be part of it. And yet, when Jamie Oliver tried to address this, He got fairly badly pilloried by some corners of the media. I always remember the mothers at the school fence pushing junk food through the chain link fences because Jamie had taken turkey Twizzlers off the menu. Asma, thank you. That's definitely part of it. Would you like to have a guess at what my world football exclusive story with a tangential link to Jude Bellingham is?
I can't figure out if it's something good or bad.
It's good. It's really exciting. It's really exciting.
Is he fit to play?
No, it's only very tangential, the link to Jude Bellingham. It's not really about Jude Bellingham at all. It's a very tangential link to Jude Bellingham, but it is a world exclusive football story.
Okay, I'll wait to find out.
That's the correct answer. 11:45 is the time. Has Jude Bellingham bought the Mystery Hour board game? Asks Joel, to which the answer is probably, but that's not the story. That's not the world exclusive. Hakeem suggests that his brother is with you in the studio. You refer to Job, who I think is playing in Germany now, isn't he? At Borussia Dortmund. Don't sue me if I've got that wrong. No, it's not that. Oh, says Sasha, I thought Jude Bellingham was going to be on the show. Yeah, that wouldn't be tangential, would it, Sasha? Do I need to be a dictionary as well as your favourite radio presenter? A tangential link to Jude Bellingham means very, very vague. Very vague association with Jude Bellingham. Mark asks, is he taking a soak in your huge mug? And Charlotte says, have you got his shirt on? Rebecca suggests I might have got a tattoo of the entire England squad, which again wouldn't be very tangential and wouldn't be very likely either. Peter's got it right. And Richard's got it right. Shall I do it now or shall I do it? I'll do it now because I want to... you'll work out why I'm going to do it now. Here is, and a world exclusive football story live on LBC with a tangential link to Jude Bellingham. I'm standing up now for the benefit of the camera. Here is Kidderminster Harriers' new strip for the new season in the National League. Come on, you Reds.
James O'Brien on LBC.
To 12 is the time, and like the night following the day, it's reported today that Nigel Farage was once again being somewhat economical with the truth when he claimed that his security detail had been removed by the government. He, in fact, the newspaper reports today, turned down state-funded security, which would have included a bodyguard, a car and a trained driver. The same offer, by the way, that the leader of the Conservatives and several high-profile cabinet ministers enjoyed because he didn't think it was adequate enough. And any politician, including some that I have spoken to, will tell you how rigorous these threat assessments are. Tom Tugendhat talking in the news at past. Quite poignant, really, because obviously after the suspected murder of Anne Widdecombe, an awful lot of focus is going to be put on the safety and the protection of politicians. And hopefully some focus will be put upon the importance of not speculating or trying to make political capital out of these tragedies while the police are trying to do their jobs. But you can't provide that level of security for all of them. It's the old Jubilee line paradigm, you know, like the cost, the ratio, the cost-benefit ratio. And you spend money on encasing the platform at Westminster Station because then no one can die under a train at Westminster Station. But you can't do that at all the stations without spending a huge amount of money, and they choose not to, which means they know that some people are going to die in those circumstances. That is exactly what a cost-benefit ratio is. But I thought you'd want to know that when Nigel Farage claims that he has had his security removed, the truth of the matter is that he didn't feel that the offer made to him and to Kemi Badenoch and to several high-profile cabinet ministers was commensurate with his self-image as opposed to with the security assessments undertaken by the professionals. I think Jess Phillips covered this rather well when I was on my holidays last week. You can find that show on the Global Player. The question of why you wouldn't want state-funded security is perhaps one that only he could answer. Back to the question of why this country is raising a generation of almost uniquely unhealthy children. What is it about this country and this era that explains the tragedy? Louise is in Luton. Louise, what would you like to say?
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. I think it's sort of multi-layered. So I raised 5 children, and I know how hard it is to cook meals for all of them that they like. But I think when we look at cost, the cost of eating clean now has risen astronomically compared to what it used to be. It's more, it's easier to buy convenience food. It's cheaper.
But isn't this true everywhere, though?
I think it is.
So why is it only happening here, then? Why are we so much worse than everywhere else?
Because I think when we look at the UK itself, we are sort of quite densely populated. We don't have, the climate to grow the fruit and veg at the scale that they do, different countries do. And also, we don't have the space to grow. So
they eat in winter as well, these countries. It's not just we go to Greece and Spain in the summer and see the lovely watermelons and the big old tomatoes, and we think that's but they eat in winter as well.
Yeah, I think there's a convenience aspect to it. We are, and I'm not saying that people don't sort of work and rush around there, but when we look at the sort of rat race that we seem to be in now, and a lot of women, more so, women are working now when they may have been at home previously. I think the marketing in shops is marketing for convenience, grab and go.
Yes.
That's gone up, quite a lot. And I think the marketing for children is... it's pretty, it looks great, they want one. And then all of those things that are packaged, yourself, they've got additives, preservatives, they've got long life, so they have, to have long life for them, they've got to have lots of different additives, and it's not real food. You take away that, it's more mechanical.
So you need legislation then? You'd actually need to have laws governing what can and can't be sold. I remember when they put a little bit of extra tax on fizzy drinks, all the usual suspects had a fit of the vapours, but without genuine legislation, you're not going to be able to change the direction of traffic at all. But we will always gravitate towards the worst case scenario. The easiest, most convenient, most processed, most cheap, most artificially tasty food available will be the ones that prevail.
Yeah, but I think some of it with the marketing, we buy with our eyes. And there was a documentary on quite a few years ago, and it was to do with a pie. And they made a pie with really good ingredients, but put it in a really bland packet. And then they made one with all of the kind of stuff that was left over, but put a really lovely packaging on it. And that was the one that sold, because we purchased with our eyes. So it's almost like, they did sort of, I suppose, branding on cigarettes, which was quite horrific. If you was to do something where they took away or, maybe tone down some of the colours on children's packaging so it didn't get... But
again, that's not... maybe I'm being a bit obsessive about this, but that's not UK, is it? That's not peculiar to us. What is it about this country in this era that has got everything so wrong?
It's a really good question. I mean, I do think because maybe we are convenience-led in terms of the rushing to get in. Children, we've got air fryers now. Children,
they're good. Just for the avoidance of doubt, air fryers are generally a good thing. They're a much healthier way of cooking food than some of the other alternatives.
But
they're better than frying.
It is an easy way to put it in. just to bung it in, and when you do that, if you bung that in, you become desensitized to cooking. You kind of,
Do you think so?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
it's only like an oven. It's only like an oven, just a little oven.
But you don't have to keep an eye on it. And if you've just come in and you've got 3 children and they're arguing, they're stressed from school, you've got to quickly get in and unpack and...
Yeah, but again, it's not like the air fryer is unique to the United Kingdom. All of these things are true. I wonder if... I'll get really deep on it. Is it because we were the first country to industrialise? So because the Industrial Revolution started here, we moved from land to factory quicker and earlier than everybody else did. But then that wouldn't explain why the other countries haven't subsequently caught us up on the race to the bottom. I don't know. Louise, great stuff. Thank you. Rachel's in Worcester. Rachel, what would you like to say?
Hi. It was interesting listening to Louise. So I've got a couple of ideas. The first one is that I think a lot of the fact in the UK, both parents tend to work, and often they tend to work full time, and I think that's a really big factor because I work part time.
That's true everywhere else as well, though, isn't it?
I don't know that it necessarily is. Not in
Germany. France?
Maybe Germany, but not specifically for France, and I would say definitely not Italy. I would say that the mums tend to be part-time or stay at home, whereas in the UK we just can't afford to do that.
78% of women aged 25 to 54 are working in France.
Fair enough.
So you're wrong. I mean that kindly, because but because I'll tell you what it is, and this is why it's dangerous to go down this route, because they've got much better childcare than we've got. Much more supportive state system.
That could be it, because the issue is how long it takes to cook. So I am a big cook, and I come from a family of big cooks. And my family, sat there because I present them with these lovely dinners, and they don't realise that I've literally spent anywhere between 4 to 10 hours on a meal
10
for
hours?
them to enjoy.
What are you doing, a suckling pig?
Well, if you want to do really good pulled pork, you're going to have to, get
so
up
it's been in the oven
morning.
for 10 hours. You haven't been actually in action for 10 hours.
But I will be stood up for a good couple of hours of those 4 to 10 hours. And, that is important. People don't have that sort of time. They come home, they want to get something in quickly, and they don't often have the education that is needed for food. They don't understand about different cooks. And I know this from my peers. I'm 46. My best friends are still my school friends. And we were talking about roasting a beef. And I said, well, what cut was it? And they said, I don't know, just the cheapest one. And I'm sat there saying, well, that could be brisket, it could be skirt, it could be this. And they look at me as if I'm speaking another language. They don't know about different food types and the way it should be cooked.
Well, how come you do?
Very good question. So, number one, I think it's to do with my upbringing and the fact that my mum really cared about food and what went into it. And I think you've got to love. The answer is wanting to put love into the food.
Yeah.
So you learn about
There's
it.
something in that.
Yeah, there is. And, it's a bit like pork scratchings. You can buy pork scratchings, but I will go to the butcher and I will buy the pork skin and I'll make my own pork scratchings, and I know what's in them.
Respectfully, that's a tiny bit excessive.
Yes, maybe it is.
But you could go to, I'm trying to think, whereabouts in Worcester are you?
So I'm South Worcester, so just below Evesham.
I can't think off the top of my head. Used to be able to go to Charlie Clark's in Kidderminster. A good butcher will have a nice bag of pork scratchings on the counter that you can buy.
Yes, they will, but I know what's in
that's
mine.
pure fat, Rachel. How can you be coming on the radio extolling the virtue of a face full of fat during a conversation about healthy eating? That's literally fat. It's pure fat.
It's also got protein in, and then what I do is I render off the tallow, and I keep the tallow for cooking for things. And it's a bit like a roast chicken. I roast a chicken, and it feeds 4 people, and then it'll do sandwiches, and then I'll boil the carcass, and then it'll do a soup or stock. No one does these things.
You can do a nice risotto. I do. I make a risotto with my chicken stock. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't spend the time.
I know, and a lot of people don't have the time or find the time, or they don't have the knowledge and the confidence and all of those things that explain why Jamie Oliver should be canonised. But yeah, I mean, you are making an awful lot of sense. I don't buy the 2 working parents thing. That's a sort of weird and I know I'm not blaming you for that because it's a very popular trope in the conversation, but that's why I'm fascinated by why this country is different from other countries. So, for example, you could message me saying, did you know there are more McDonald's in France than there are in the UK? And I don't know whether that's true or not, but I know that if you go to McDonald's in France, you will find local cheeses on the burgers, like Emmental or Cantal. And you can buy a muck baguette, which will be on a freshly baked baguette. You go to McDonald's in France, you can have crepes and macarons. You can even grab a beer, actually, although that's not really on message when it comes to the healthy conversation. And then you compare that to this country, and you are talking about two completely different meals, even though they have the same name on the box. Thank you, Rachel. I've got an away shirt as well, Eleanor. I've got the away shirt as well. Do you think, is it possible to have too much? I mean, could the show cope with two world-exclusive football stories with a tangential link to... Oh, I haven't explained what the tangential link to Jude Bellingham is, have I? So Jude Bellingham should, by rights, be playing for Kidderminster Harriers, because the lad grew up in Stourbridge, which is just down the road. Also, the site, as most of the Black Country, you get the finest pork scratchings in the world. It's a miracle how I can knit all this stuff together, isn't it? So Jude Bellingham and Joe Bellingham should both really have been playing for Kidderminster Harriers, not least because his dad... or their dad, Mark Bellingham, who was a police officer, a sergeant in my neck of the woods when I was growing up. He played for pretty much every amateur non-league team in the West Midlands except Kidderminster Harriers. So that's the tangential link to my world-exclusive unveiling of the new Kidderminster Harriers shirt just a few moments ago, live on this programme. The tangential link is that Jude Bellingham grew up almost within spitting distance of the Kidderminster Harriers Stadium, or the home of football, as it's not known.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 6 minutes after 12 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Listen, can I confide in you? This is quite genuine, actually. As a rule, when I decide to talk about a story that has literally just broken, it doesn't always go as well as the other conversations that we have on the programme. I haven't fully worked out why this is, because my job, and God knows I take long enough to introduce a subject, so there's no excuse for not knowing what the subject is by the time I get to the end of my interminable monologue. But I think it's got something to do with percolation. I think that sometimes a story has to percolate through our conversational system. You have to spend a little bit more than 20 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes thinking about something. You need to be aware of something in the background. And then as I say that out loud to you, I think, is that true? I mean, were you aware this morning of the story about British children being more unhealthy than pretty much anybody else? Were you aware of today's findings on that front? You're previously aware of the phenomenon, but were you specifically aware of that story? I mean, the weather... Obviously, you were aware of the weather, but were you aware? I don't know if it's true. It's just a little thing I've got. What's the word for that? It's not a prejudice. I've just got like what's like the mental equivalent of an earworm? Is it a brain worm? I've just got this thing. No, I'm thinking now of Robert Kennedy, aren't I? I've got this idea in my head that when I choose to do a story at 5 minutes after 12, because I just heard it in the 12 noon news, I've just got the idea in my head that it doesn't always go very well as a phone-in. I'm just going to check with my colleagues. Do you agree with that? Does that tally with your... I don't think anyone's listening to me. This is terrible. Not only... I mean, this is my own studio. No one's listening to me. The recollections of phone-ins when we've decided to do a topic in the moment after the news has broken, and I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to do that now because this just makes me sick. £10 billion. Boris Johnson's government spent... You remember him? You remember him? Yeah. £14.9 billion spent by the government on PPE. 2/3 of it completely wasted. £10 billion worth. £10 billion worth of PPE utterly wasted. Carol Vorderman, when she came in to do Full Disclosure, a big friend of this radio station, Carol, as you know, and we bonded over a very simple observation. And listen, neither of us, especially me, are holier than thou. Carol actually did put her money where her mouth is. She made her maths education modules, a maths education program, available throughout the pandemic for free, where ordinarily, because it's a business, you would pay to access it. But we both bonded over this very simple idea that when an alarm goes off, you like to think that most people would think to themselves, how can I help? Right? An alarm goes off, how can I help? So you're not a professional. It's not your job to run into the burning building or anything like that, but how can I help? If there's a national crisis, if there's a war on, and you might not be in the army, and in the absence of conscription, you might not be signing up, but what can I do to help? If I put together care packages for the troops out there, do a bit of raising of awareness of the mental health charities that are going to help these people when they come back from the war zone. How can I help? I think it was arguably the most abject lesson in cynicism that I've ever had when I looked around this country in the dog days of the pandemic and the lockdowns and saw almost all of the ruling class in this country hear the alarm bells ringing and think to themselves, how can I make a few quid? How can I make a few quid? Some cases, of course, are still ongoing in a very legal sense, so we can't talk about those. But and there will be some genuine errors here. There will be some people who sold useless PPE, believing that it was useful, because there was, an emergency situation was in place. But it can't all be explained away so easily. £10 billion worth of our money wasted, but also, of course, given to individuals and companies, some of whom had only set up their organisation the day before they got the contract. Absolutely wasted. I'm going to ask you why, I think, but before we do that, Fraser Knight has been at the inquiry, listening to the details revealed today of Module 5, which is the module of the inquiry chaired by the inimitable Baroness Hallett that has been looking specifically at procurement. What can you tell us, Fraser?
James, the theme from the COVID inquiry of the UK being underprepared for COVID continues in this report. Baroness Hallett really criticising how unprepared we were for procuring emergency medical equipment that was so desperately needed, PPE, ventilators, oxygen, all of the above, but also with really heavy criticism of the wasted money. £14.9 billion was spent on PPE alone during the inquiry. Of that, she has said almost 2/3 of it, £10 billion, was wasted. And there's been a lot of conversation and a lot of focus in this module as well around the way that those emergency deals, those emergency procurement was handled. The VIP lane that was set up right at the heart of government, that was for offers of help that were sent directly to ministers and senior officials. She has said that should never have been set up, and it should never be repeated either. It treated people favourably, but she has said it has transpired that those contracts turned out to be more expensive, and proportionally they had more performance issues than some of the contracts that were issued through the normal routes. She said that the government just wasn't set up in a way to deal with trying to get those emergency contracts through. And then when there was a call to arms, essentially, from the Health Secretary then, Matt Hancock, and the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, they were simply inundated with offers that they couldn't properly triage them. One of the figures that really stood out to me here is that in just 15 weeks after they had been warned not to make that Dunkirk spirit-style call to arms, they had 25,000 offers from 15,000 suppliers. And because of the pressure that was being put on officials from the ministers who were referring in their own contacts, asking what was happening with them, that was why the VIP lane was set up. But really heavy criticism in this report, saying that that was not the right thing to do. And of course, it also says it damaged public trust right at the time when it was needed most. There was such a lack of transparency. 11 recommendations she's making in this report to improve that, but also to improve those processes, because she says £10 billion, a vast amount of public money, was wasted as a result.
I mean, I know that she has stressed that she has not identified cronyism or corruption on the part of ministers and officials, but suggesting that it was at best misguided and embedded unfairness in emergency procurement is damning enough. The idea was that if a company making a PPE offer came with a recommendation from ministers, MPs or members of the House of Lords, the huge majority of which would have had links to the Conservative Party, then they would receive preferential treatment. They would be progress. They would be accelerated through the process.
Exactly that. And they said that some of those referrals that were made were almost seen to be more credible because they were people that were known by those ministers, by those senior officials, by those MPs. But actually it didn't necessarily mean that the offer that was being made was a credible one. One of the quotes that I'll just read out for you here that's in the report, as Matt Hancock MP stated, the approach was to deal with any legal headaches later. The primary goal above all else was to save lives. And another bit, it says it was not uncommon then for some of the suppliers who were making those offers to threaten officials that they would escalate their grievances to the press or to ministers. The common thread was that these offers were potentially politically sensitive and were from people who would require greater handling. But then when you drill down into some of the figures and the statistics that are in this report, you can see that the average cost per unit was much higher, that the performance issues that came alongside it was proportionally higher, and that's why this recommendation is being made, that there needs to be a much better process. We were relying too heavily, Baroness Hallett says, on contracts in China. We didn't have enough set up to grow, to create more equipment here in the UK, and that is where this all went wrong, she says.
No prospect of seeing any of this money return into the taxpayers' pockets?
Well, we've been told that they are going to try. Certainly when the Labour government came in, they said that they were going to try and claw back some of that money. We have seen, the High Court making certainly at least one order, that was for PPE MedPro, to pay back money. But they are, of course, as we know, under criminal investigation, or certainly some of the people linked to it are. The inquiry here did hear evidence surrounding PPE MedPro, but because of the ongoing investigation, it hasn't actually released that information. It says that will only come out when the criminal investigation has concluded. It's been going on since 2021. Of course, we have seen one arrest, but Doug Barrowman and the Conservative peer Baroness Moan both have always denied any wrongdoing. But, even more widely, there are other questions about the quality of PPE and the quality of equipment that was put forward, a lot of it having to be incinerated because it wasn't up to standard. There are so many questions around how it all went so wrong, how so much money was wasted.
And we'll ask some of those questions now, I think. Fraser Knight, thank you very much. I mean, do you remember the call we took from a woman who was working for a ventilator company and had actual ventilators that were available and couldn't get anyone to pick up the phone? It was a little bit after the event that we spoke, or was it actually in the thick of it? I can't quite remember. And I remember a sense of, there's probably a German word for a combination of disbelief, but also resignation. I can't believe this is true, but I can. Do you see what I mean? Like a sort of cognitive dissonance. And she had actual ventilators that were ready. They were ready to be deployed. And she wasn't able to get through to anybody in the relevant offices and departments. But if you were mates with Matt Hancock, or if you were pulling pints in his local pub, then you could get through to the relevant departments. That's not an opinion, that's just counting. Baroness Hallett has not found evidence of cronyism or corruption, but I don't know what definition of cronyism you use to arrive at that conclusion. Because if you know someone who is close to government, you get your calls answered. And if you don't, you don't. So I guess cronyism is a slightly more nuanced descriptor than I would previously have allowed. So I am interested in the impact of what we're hearing. Not just in the question of how it happened, but in what it meant to you. And I appreciate that this might be quite traumatic for you, actually. That you prefer perhaps not to think about those months when you were at the absolute front line of an unfolding national tragedy, while politicians, Boris Johnson included, were holding parties in Downing Street. You were dealing with death, misery and tragedy in unbearable circumstances. And those circumstances were made worse. By this scandal. Those circumstances in which you tried to do your job were made worse by the fact that the government was handing over billions of pounds for useless PPE. So, 0345 6060973 is the number you need to tell me how let's just say the shortage, how the mismanagement of the PPE situation affected you. What were you wearing on the wards? What were you doing? How did the fact that the government was uniquely incompetent, if not corrupt, and I stress again that the findings had not found corruption or cronyism, but the government was uniquely incompetent. 15 billion, I mean, it's actually almost unbelievable how much of this money turned out to be spent on goods that were not fit for purpose. What happened? That's question number one. What happened in your world as a consequence of this failure? 0345 6060973. And then I think we can have a crack at how did this happen? How did this happen? I was quite naive going into the pandemic. I felt that this country would be quite well equipped to cope. I watched the scenes coming from Italy and I thought to myself, I'm pretty sure we're better than that. I'm pretty sure I hope that doesn't sound racist or xenophobic. Maybe it's a bit of both, but I hope not. I just remember thinking, surely our system is better equipped than theirs to cope with this sort of crisis. And the next thing you know, nurses are going to work wearing plastic bags because there's no PPE to be found. And then you start discovering that they're buying stuff that is unfit for use from people who are on the same dinner party circuit as they are. And it's still worth asking, in terms of further detail, it's still worth asking, how do you think this happened? How did we end up spending $10 billion on PPE that was not fit for purpose? And I mean, listen, you can't libel anybody, obviously, but you can tell me what you think the explanation or what you think the reason is. They spent 14.9 billion and 10 billion of it was wasted. That's not, I mean, that's not, what's the word I'm looking for? That's not even close to an absorbable cost. So we spent £20 billion on PPE and unfortunately, 5 billion of it was wasted? But that's the price you pay when you're moving on a pinhead in a time of international emergency. You would forgive a little, there'd be leeway, right? There'd be leeway. We spent £20 billion on PPE and £2 billion turned out to be wasted. Or we spent 15, stay with the actual figures. We spent £15 billion on PPE and unfortunately £1.5 billion worth was wasted. We spent £15 billion on PPE and unfortunately a third was wasted. £5 billion, but you don't understand what it was like. Our backs were to the wall, our noses were to the grindstone. We had to move fast and we had to move decisively. So we ended up spending, for every £2 we spent on the good stuff, we were spending £1 on the bad stuff. That's not what happened. For every pound they spent on the good stuff, they were spending £2 on the bad stuff. I have no idea how that happened, and I have no idea who will be able to tell us how they think it did happen, but I know that there'll be someone listening to this programme that can, and I know that it might well be you. So, 0345 6060973 is the number you need. Question 1, the personal. How did this hit you? 0345 6060973. Question 2, the political. How the hell did this happen? How did Boris Johnson's government end up spending, for every pound they spent on decent PPE, they spent £2 on the dodgy stuff?
This is LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
5 after 12 is the time. The personal, of course, what happened to you as a consequence of Boris Johnson's government abject failure to be even vaguely competent in the procurement of PPE. And then the political, what on earth explains how they could have got everything, how they could have performed so appallingly. But there's also room, I think, for your your abiding memory, as it were. So, the equivalent of the lady who rang us to tell us that she actually had ventilators that were ready, that were fit for purpose, that were good to go, and she couldn't get hold of anybody who might have been able to deploy them. So what did you do during that period as someone who wasn't on the VIP lane? Do you see what I mean? I hope this works. You couldn't get on the VIP lane because you weren't Matt Hancock's pub landlord, or you hadn't been at school with Boris Johnson. What happened when you tried to help? With kit and caboodle that to this day was good. You know that the stuff that you wanted to help supply was fit for purpose, but you couldn't get your phone picked up when billions of pounds worth of unfit goods were being snapped up by the government as a consequence of a VIP lane set up for people who had their home phone numbers or their mobiles. Raffi is in Edinburgh. Raffi, what can you tell us?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello.
Just a couple of thoughts, really. Really glad that you've picked this up. So I'm a nurse, and during COVID, we were all kind of put back out into the wards, essentially, to try and support. I was just saying to your researcher there that I think the PPE thing was really tough. I suppose I should start by saying that, the hospitals were amazing. They just did everything they could to keep us as safe as possible.
Well, the people in the hospitals, that's the point, isn't it? The people like you.
And I've worked in the NHS for 26 years, and never have I worked in a time where actually people were just really pulling together. Every day went in, something had changed, everything was flexing, and actually the NHS was really working as a team and really trying to kind of deliver. But what I was trying to say was that one of the hardest things each day was rocking up to your PPE station before you went into a COVID ward and not knowing what you were going to come up to. So your mask, your gloves, your aprons, and as time went on, just that PPE got worse and worse. So some days you would rock up and there'd just be a sticker on a box of something that had expired 5 years earlier, and
we think now someone had sold that to them, possibly. They weren't just pulling it out of the storeroom, because it wouldn't have been in the storeroom if it was out of date.
It shouldn't have been in the storeroom if it was out of date. So I don't know where it was sourced from. But my point was that, yes, I was concerned about my health because it was before vaccines and we were still doing research trials to see what we could potentially do to help people. But it was really about, I had to go home after this. And so, I was worried that I was unable to keep the people at home safe simply through these PPE choices. And it was just really, it was tough.
Did you have time at the time? Raffi, did you have time to think about this? Because I'm struck by the constant state of emergency that you would have been in at work. So, oh my God, there's a box here with out-of-date PPE in it. You wouldn't, at that moment, in that period, you wouldn't have been thinking to yourself, how the hell did this happen? Because you were too busy thinking, I've got to go look after that person in that bed over there, or not.
Yeah, I think we just thought, what's the option?
Yes.
And that there wasn't another option, and actually we could raise it with infection control services, and they were great. They were just saying, we're trying to provide what we can for you, but there wasn't another option. You had to go in, so you had to take what you had.
And looking back, do you have any answers to that? I mean, do you have any theories, answers, idea? How the heck did this happen? Because if you did your job that badly, people would be dead.
Yeah, I think we just trusted that if what we needed would always be provided for us as healthcare professionals, especially when we could see that something big was coming. Our colleagues in Italy, we knew it was coming. So why were we so ill prepared? It wasn't even at the start. It was okay. It's just as time went on, it got more depleted and less high quality, I would say, certainly just from a general nursing perspective. And the other thing I was just saying was that the nursing staff and medical staff really pulled hard. So there was people in those wards who didn't have toiletries or clothing because they'd just come in, but people couldn't bring stuff into them, or people who were dying and needed to talk to their families via iPads. And it was local charities within the hospital and staff members who brought that stuff in for them. money out their own pockets just to try and support that. So the money that has gone into PPE that was never, used makes me angry, because I just think,
So you're never going to get reimbursed for that, are you? You're not going to get reimbursed for the...
and nobody would want it, but I think it's just that lack of people focus.
That's a generous way of putting it, a lack of people focus. I'd probably have stronger words, but that's why I do what I do for a living, and you care for people on a day-to-day basis. It's the hospitals. That's the bit I struggle with. If I turned up for work as a gob on a stick in an air-conditioned studio that no one else has to come into, and they hadn't done what they could have, everything they could have done to look after me, and for the record, they did. I was better looked after than you by my employer during the pandemic, and I just chat nonsense on the radio. You're literally looking after people. In a hospital, you were being given out-of-date stuff. It was bad enough if you were in a factory, or you were in a shop, or you were in, as I say, a radio station. But in a hospital, to go into battle, to go up against what you were up against, without feeling as if anybody had your back.
Yeah, and I felt like the hospital had our back.
Of course.
I felt like probably the bigger
above
system
that, Matt Hancock.
couldn't really see actually what the reality was at the front door of the Red Wards. For people who were
thank you for everything you did, and I mean, do you think about it much, or have you sort of filed it away?
Do you know, James, I think you've probably got a generation of healthcare workers who are pretty scarred by it. Yeah. There's positives. I think I was really fortunate in that whilst everybody was slightly going off their heads at home, I had something to get up for every day. Yes. I went in, we had community, we had support. We were all working closely together and supporting each other. We had psychological support. But we just saw too much death and too many people dying quickly without the support of their families round about them. So I think there's many of us, even just listening to the news and then hearing your initial talk about it, it just gives you that kind of feeling in the pit of your stomach again.
I can only imagine, Rafi. I can only imagine, and I thank you for helping me to conduct this conversation in a sensitive way that is mindful of exactly that impact on people like you and so many of your colleagues, because my listeners, or a massive majority of my listeners, would care about that sort of thing. It's hard to imagine that the people trousering millions and millions and millions of pounds for substandard PPE gave a hoot, or indeed do now. 12:33 is the time. Tim Humphrey is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Got little echoes of some of the stories that scandalised me, but they are as nothing compared to the memories that people like Rafi and her colleagues in the health service are going to have. Even when they hear the phrase red wards, there'll be tummies turning over and sick feelings growing. I remember this. Gabriel Pogrund at the Sunday Times did a pretty good job of tracking down many of these people. There was a bloke called Philip Johnson who had a company in Birmingham that made foam products. And he got awarded a £149 million government contract for PPE visors, about 70% of which were never used. And the story I remember was him tucking into a cake, a birthday cake, which was styled as a briefcase full of cash. He paid himself 13 million quid after seeing his company profits rise at a quite extraordinary rate as a direct consequence of that contract. The company, after that story emerged, subsequently went into liquidation. And that's what I meant about Carol Vorderman. Because even if you were in a position to provide something of use, the mentality that thinks, let's sell it for as much as we can during a time of national crisis, if indeed that's what's happened there. I've shared you all the details that I'm aware of, but we know that there were plenty of people who were saying, well, what's the most we can charge? People like Rafi working for a relative pittance compared to the £13 million that this chap trousered. And that's on a contract that was £149 million. So that's money that's left over after the business has been done for one member of the outfit. Just thinking, what's the most we can squeeze out of the taxpayer at a time like this? Matthew's in Deal. Matthew, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, I work for a private ambulance service offering patient transport, and during March and April 2020, we saw PPE coming in, like really flimsy aprons that would break as soon as you put them on, and gloves. Instead of the blue gloves, we usually have ones that were clear and looked like they would use in a sandwich shop, and it was just substandard, absolute rubbish. We were offered the proper face masks, but ended up with those flimsy ones that break when you put them over your ear. And
why? Well, what do you mean you were offered the proper one? Sorry, I remember.
We were offered the proper.
Why didn't you take them?
Well, because they fitted us for them, and then they never turned up.
Oh,
never
so you
appeared.
weren't offered them. Sorry, I mean
we
you were
offered
told
them,
you were going to get them, and then you didn't.
We were going to get them, and it never happened. And at that sort of time, especially April, we were emptying the hospitals of people to go to care homes, and the care homes were saying, have they been tested? Well, don't know, probably not. You know, we were part of that. I just feel so guilty for it as well. And I had COVID.
Why
for the
do you
first
feel
time.
guilty?
Well, because we were taking these poorly people into care homes, and look what happened in the care homes.
Yeah, but it wasn't your decision.
No, but it's just, you feel part of it.
Yeah, I suppose you do.
Yeah, it's just so, it makes my blood boil listening to it, all the money that's been wasted. And
it's an extraordinary figure that it's 2/3 of all the money spent, because as I say, there's going to be some natural wastage, or there's going to be some shrinkage, or whatever slightly euphemistic word you want to use. You're not going to get 100% value for money on almost anything you ever buy. But for 2/3 of it to be dodged or unused is incredible, right?
It's criminal, isn't it?
Yes,
Awful.
it is. Although she says no evidence of criminality or cronyism or corruption has been found, which makes you wonder how she would explain it. I'll find out. I'll read up on it a bit more after the show.
However, all the people like myself who have now got long COVID and are still living with it, you know?
Yes.
There's no apology to us. There's no help for us at all.
Well, I mean, that's not entirely true, because, of course, if your long COVID means that you can no longer work at anything like the level that you worked on before, then there'll be a tabloid journalist or a Conservative politician along anytime soon to accuse you of malingering and faking and just inventing your condition in order to get hold of some benefit payments, Matthew. Exactly. So there is that, mate.
Yeah, lovely. Something to look forward to.
I'm glad I made you smile. You take care. Thank you for what you did. The reason you feel guilt, Kevin points out, is because you have a conscience. And one wonders how much conscience is possessed by the people who made the millions of pounds, whether or not they celebrated their windfalls with briefcase full of cash-shaped birthday cakes or not. Perhaps they bought a yacht. James is in St Agnes in Cornwall. James, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.
I was just being interviewed just before your show about leadership and organisational change. And I'd mentioned quite presciently that the job of an organisation and a leader is to build capacity for when the unforeseen happens.
Yes.
And that's where I think we failed here. So pandemics are prepared for, and it should not have been a shock, whilst they're rare, to have things in place. Now, there's a lot to be learnt now, and the key is to take the identified lesson and now learn it for the future, because there will be another pandemic. And I suppose my point is in planning for these things, and I do planning for emergency response, is I would very much like to think that we now have trusted suppliers ready for these situations, that we can update every 18 months to 2 years in planning exercises, so we're never caught short again. It's all about planning, and it sounds really, really simple, but the answer normally is quite simple.
Yes, well, preparation. It's the thing, isn't it? And I think I remember, and I'm just double checking because I don't want to get any facts wrong during this conversation, that Boris Johnson literally scrapped the government's Threats, Hazards, Resilience and Contingency Committee, which would have been charged with preparing the country for a pandemic some 6 months before the coronavirus broke out in the UK.
Absolutely.
It's just incredible, isn't it? And yet, of course, he continues to sort of swan around the place, getting richly rewarded by various plutocrats and the Daily Mail. When you say it's simple, what you mean is that the known unknowns can be dealt with. What about the unknown unknowns, if you see what I mean?
Well,
I mean, because what was it?
No, I do. So there's only one way you deal with those, And that's been by being fully prepared for what you do know. So you have the capacity to surge for those things that you can't prepare for.
Okay.
It's all about building capacity ultimately.
Yes, and having it in place. I can't even remember what happened with the Nightingale hospitals, but that looked to me like something that would be done by a government that hadn't got its proper preparation in place, but was desperately scrabbling around to do something or anything in the face of imminent potential disaster.
Well, and actually with that, it's a case in point. We need those prepared for the day that we're at war again, and that could come fairly soon. So we need to take these lessons and adapt them further, because the country isn't all that ready. When I speak to the general population, it's brilliant that people feel safe.
Sure.
But we need to prepare for the day that we're not, and it's coming.
Yes, thus speaks an emergency or a disaster planner. It's brilliant that people feel safe, brackets, but they shouldn't, close brackets. I'm sure you're very good at what you do. Thank you, James. 12. It's just coming up to 1:45. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Natasha Clark has been with the Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper, who had some particularly interesting things to say about her government's handling of the Palestinian issue, perhaps more than many of the other things they talked about. It's something that I'm keen to dig into a little deeper. We'll be doing that before the end of the programme. The time now is 12:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:47. You're better at this than I am. In fact, thank you to about half a dozen people who've reminded me of the full disclosure that we did with Lucy Easthope, who is in the same world that James, our last caller, was in its sort of disaster response and emergency planning. One of the most inspirational people that I've ever met, Lucy. And you can find that full disclosure wherever you get your podcast. You can also find it, I should have mentioned to you, on a new YouTube channel dedicated to full disclosure, my sort of long-form interview podcast, which it's had what they've called a soft launch. I'm not entirely sure what that means. It possibly means I'm not supposed to be telling you about it. Keith is nodding. Well, anyway, it's too late now, Keith. Anyway, everyone's too busy talking about my world-exclusive football story with a tangential link to Jude Bellingham to worry about this sort of stuff. So it's just up and running now, so you can find all of the lots of full disclosures there, and also little clips of bits and highlights, and it's worth digging out the Lucy Easthope one from Global Player as well. More on that YouTube excitement as I have it. But Natasha Clark is here, fresh back overnight from Belgium, where she was. Can I say where you were?
Yeah, of course.
That's good, because I already...
You just did.
But sometimes these things are classified, not after.
After the fact,
not after it. That's all right. With Yvette.
That's all right. I've put a picture on the social media, so it's okay.
Already been a giveaway. Were you wearing a football shirt?
No, I wasn't.
Why not?
Yours is hanging outside the office. I deliberated showing up in it. I deliberated just popping it on. That would have been a bit. I thought it would have been a bit weird, actually, so I decided not to do it. But yes, I've been in Brussels with the Foreign Secretary, where there were no football shirts worn at all. We did discuss the football, actually. I asked her about those Falklands comments,
yes.
and she did hit back quite firmly, actually, saying, guys, let's focus on the football. and this is nothing to do.
Forget about the international diplomacy.
Yeah, exactly.
Or indeed the future of the Falkland Islands.
Yeah, no, she told me, she said it's not going to change. She said they are sovereign and it's not going to change.
Quite right, too.
But yes, I did think that the most interesting part of the interview that we did, which was that she was there I saw her speak, and I was in the room while she spoke with the Palestinian Prime Minister.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a discussion, and he was incredibly grateful to the Labour government, and he was talking to Yvette Cooper, who he's met before, about them designating Palestine as a state, about the work that they're trying to do with the Palestinian donor group. Yesterday, EU leaders committed more than 900 million euros in total across the Eurozone for this new Palestine fund to try to rebuild Gaza, and lots of work being done behind the scenes about sort of recognition of states, and on the world stage, of course, you've got this rival group as well, the Donald Trump's sort of peace board as well. That, James, I think that the word on the street that seems to be going absolutely nowhere, by the way.
What?
Yeah,
Donald
I know, exactly.
Trump's board of peace is not turning into an incredibly important international body dedicated to the promotion of peace and welfare across the world, and definitely not a vanity project presided over by Donald Trump.
Yeah, especially given, obviously, the people on those on that board.
But didn't they have the head of FIFA? Wasn't there
very
head of
important
FIFA
people on
involved?
that board? Yeah.
Well, honestly, whatever next.
Yeah, so Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, appeared on video link at one of the Palestine donor meetings yesterday, which caused a flurry of excitement in the room, because that basically was a little bit of a hint that they're going to essentially fold in behind their EU plans rather than set up their own rival board. So that was interesting to speak with the Foreign Secretary about. But obviously you'll have been off when this happened. This happened last week, but I'm sure you heard about it. Andy Burnham last week apologised for Labour's initial response to Israel's military action in Gaza. He said the party didn't get it right and that we need to do better under his leadership. So this could be a pretty big moment for the Labour Party, a big significant shift in the UK approach towards the Middle East. And we don't know much about Andy Burnham's foreign policy, to be quite honest with you, James. And that's
I'm not sure Andy Burnham does.
I'm not sure Andy Burnham does either. But and we'll get onto that later. But I asked Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, the current Foreign Secretary, we should say, if she agreed with his assessment of the situation about Gaza.
Yeah, I think, look, Andy was right that there were things, especially in the early stages, that we should have done better. But look, the important thing now is that we really focus on the peace process in Gaza, but also the challenges in the West Bank, and making sure that the two-state solution for Israel and Palestine living alongside each other isn't completely undermined. And I think we're at a real moment of peril at the moment. That's why I'm here today at this meeting with the Palestinian Authority, with international partners, because we have to get new international energy behind the Gaza peace process, make sure that we can get more humanitarian aid, and the UK is setting out additional funding today, but also to get the pressure on for the Israeli government to lift the immoral restrictions on aid getting into Gaza, because that is how we will make progress on some of these basic issues around sanitation and support for people.
So that was Yvette Cooper essentially agreeing with that assessment from Andy Burnham. And you'll remember, James, that the backlash that we got on the phones after that interview that Keir Starmer did at the Labour Party conference, where he appeared to suggest that he might be willing to support cutting off aid and food and water to Gaza in the outcome of that. And that got an almighty backlash. It did take a while for Keir Starmer to clarify that that's not what he'd intended to say and that's not what he meant. But that really damaged the lots of sort of community support for the Labour Party. And we haven't really gone into much about that in terms of Keir Starmer's legacy, but I do believe that it's a big part of his lack of support in the wider nation. I think is a big part of that is his position over Israel and Gaza, for sure.
Well, it's peak Keir Starmer, isn't it? Getting attacked from one side for going too far and getting attacked from the other side for not going far enough.
Exactly.
Whether or not that's avoidable or whether or not Andy Burnham can negotiate this kind of territory better remains to be seen. But it might be of interest to people who sort of see themselves as great champions of the Palestinian cause and simultaneously as great enemies of Keir Starmer. It should be of interest to them that Mohammed Mustafa, who you were with yesterday, the Prime Minister of the first technocratic government in Palestine's history, had only very warm words to say about how the Labour government has handled most elements of this issue.
Yes, and you speak to that balance that Sir Keir Starmer was trying to talk about there. Obviously he came in and inherited a Labour Party that he claims was riddled with anti-Semitism at the time from Jeremy Corbyn. So he would have been, completely trying to balance that out in his thoughts. And I think that's probably where the entire mess around that LBC interview came from, James. But yes, you're totally right. He had nothing but warm words for the government in terms of their recognition of Palestine as a state and the work that they're doing behind the scenes on this. But obviously Yvette Cooper, interesting character. She obviously knows Andy Burnham from the days where she was serving alongside him when he was Health Secretary in the Tony Blair years and the Gordon Brown years. And I'm told that she really wants to stay as Foreign Secretary. There have been discussions, potentially Wes Streeting for the role, potentially another Andy Burnham supporter. But she told me that this was her pitch for the job.
We really are at a time of huge global instability. So what my focus continues to be this week, just like every single other week, is on how we strengthen Britain's response to that instability and insecurity, how we make sure we can be a strong country, but also how we work in alliances to shape the world, not just to be passive, but to actually shape the world for the future as well.
So would it be a bit of a risk for Andy Burnham to get the new Foreign Secretary, would you say?
So ultimately, it's for Andy.
But you would make just to confess, you would like to stay foreign.
And I'm very much enjoying the work I'm doing. I also think it's really important. But ultimately, what I've always said throughout this process is that we have to make sure that the transition that takes place is done in the interests of the country and is done in a stable and orderly way. We have seen in the past, even in recent years, and particularly under the Conservatives, we saw very chaotic political periods and lots of jostling and very sort of tense, difficult situations.
That was Yvette Cooper giving me her reasons why she wants to stay as Foreign Secretary, speaking to me in Brussels yesterday. And she sort of talked about the instability aspect. And there is an argument to keep her as Foreign Secretary if indeed we think that Andy Burnham will potentially want to spend more time within the United Kingdom. You've got somebody who's already been on the world stage for 2 years that has all these relationships with other people. And there has been talk, as I'm sure you're aware, James, of David Miliband, a potential comeback for him. But there have been reports in the papers today that actually he's eyeing up the post of ambassador to the United Kingdom in Washington instead. So that would essentially free up that space potentially for somebody like Yvette Cooper. So we may see some stability. I think it's unlikely that most of the big jobs will go to people who are already in government, but that's what I think is possible.
What's the calendar? Remind me.
It's later this week. Andy Burnham will become Labour leader on Friday. He's not had anyone challenge him, and then he'll become Prime Minister on Monday because basically of issues with the palace and their schedule.
I'm glad I asked. Crikey, honestly, I go away for a fortnight, the whole world stops.
You would have missed it.
So Friday, he becomes Labour leader. We'll have a new Prime Minister on Monday of next week.
Yeah. So that Keir Starmer might be able to go to the World Cup final on Sunday.
Admittedly, I should have known that. It's a great failure on my part. I'm told that we have enormous plans.
We've got big plans.
Will there be much pageantry? Can I do a live commentary?
I really hope you will.
Oh, happy days.
I really
Can I wear my football shirt? No, probably not.
It's probably not the day for it, but,
Eleanor's written yes, no on the screen. So I think that is, can I do some live commentary? Yes. Can I wear my football shirt? No.
I think that's fair.
So once in a season moment, I think, me unveiling the new Kidderminster Harriers home strip, which of course you'll be able to see at Hornchurch on August the 8th, a mere 37 stops on the district line for me to get to an away game. But I digress. Thank you, Natasha, and thank you for fitting us in as well, because I know you were very, very busy yesterday. You got back very, very late. What happens on Monday? Is there a kind of anointment?
Yeah, it's basically what I think is going to happen is that Keir Starmer will essentially be...
Sorry, Sheila Fogarty is making some noises.
Anointment.
Yes, an anointment.
Anointing.
Oh, hello.
Anointment just had me sort of rubbing things on,
Are you making the pitch for your commentary?
Anointment?
No. Well, we always do it together if it coincides.
I want an ointment. Bring me an ointment. I need an ointment, I do. You're quite right, Sheila.
I'm sorry, Natasha.
It's an anointing.
It's an anointing.
You're an annoying thing.
I've just anointed you.
That feels unfair.
Dad jokes already.
There will be a handover, though, on Monday. So, Keir Starmer will probably give a few words.
We'll be here in a minute.
Oh, I was going to do that. Honestly.
I can't get through the end of the sentence, guys.
I'm so sorry.
Me.
It's like Cannon and Ball never left us.
We will see a change of Prime Minister on Monday. There'll be a little swap in and swap out and so an anointing.
And PMQs tomorrow, the last one for a while.
Final Prime Minister's questions with Sir Keir Starmer.
That's it, I think.
And that's all.
Great stuff. Thank you, Natasha. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app, where you can also stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinions. You can listen to a range of podcasts, including James O'Brien Daily and Full Disclosure. So download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Don't tell him I told you, but Simon Marks was wearing one of the nattiest Panama hats that I've ever seen when he strolled into the office yesterday. He'll be with you at 4, standing in for Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.